Chapter 1. Turn the situation around. Spirit power. Level 0.5. Kong Ming'an blinked. His blurred vision cleared, but left him with a strange, unfamiliar sensation, as if something was slightly off. He lowered his head, curled his fingers into a fist, and felt the solid reality of his hand. His pupils trembled. Am I reborn? Not exactly reborn, more like his previous life's memories had awakened. Fragments poured into his sea of consciousness. Sun Moon Empire. Mingdu. Hall of Worship. Kong Deming, the sole heir of the Kong family. He was Kong Ming'an, Hall Master of the Hall of Worship, Kong Deming's biological grandson. A useless grandson who had just awakened a level 0.5 innate spirit power in his grandfather's laboratory. The memories of his former life were far broader than the 6 years of this life. The awakening of those memories was not gentle. It slammed into him and left a splitting headache. A large, thick hand settled on his slight shoulder. Ming'an. The voice carried a weight that steadied him. His scattered thoughts snapped back into place. He looked up. Before him stood an old man with white hair and beard, a resolute face and stern bearing, but now those eyes bore real worry and concern. Kong Deming. Everything clicked into place. Identity, bloodline, relationship. The days subsided and a calm settled over Kong Ming'an. Feeling his meager spirit power sluggishly moving through him, he steadied himself. He did not return Kong Deming's anxious gaze or meet the pitying looks of the surrounding Level 9 soul engineers. He simply met his grandfather's eyes and spoke clearly. Grandpa, I want to try my spirit again. Surprise flickered across Kong Deming's face. He hadn't expected such quick composure. He pressed once on his grandson's shoulder and then withdrew. The black-robed spirit master overseeing the awakening stepped forward. Kong Ming'an placed his hand on the awakening crystal ball and let spirit power flow into it. There was no brilliant flare, no oppressive spirit pressure. The usual spirit power fluctuations of a spirit manifestation were almost non-existent. Only above the outstretched right palm did the air distort in a peculiar way, as if an invisible pebble had been dropped into still water. The space wavered in faint ripples. The air grew viscous and warm. Light passing through bent subtly, making the edges of his hand look blurred and warped. This! The black-robed spirit master's voice was dry with astonishment. As one of the Empire's few scholars of spirits, he had awakened countless people to catalog spirits. He had seen almost every kind of spirit, beast, tool, plant, but never anything like this. He leaned in, eyes wide with curiosity, searching for a trace of a spirit form. There was nothing to find. A confused look creased Kong Deming's face. Ming'an, he asked with unprecedented solemnity, what is your spirit? Kong Ming'an's gaze was steady as he slowly closed his fingers. The spatial ripples faded as if they'd never been. Energy itself, Grandpa. Energy itself? Kong Deming repeated softly, then his eyes flashed. Something in him trembled with excitement, like a scholar discovering a new continent. Energy, more fundamental than spirit power, almost equivalent to the origin of the world, had never before been defined as a spirit. Invisible, intangible energy. Kong Deming murmured, staring at his grandson as if seeing him anew. Kong Ming'an paid little heed. He scanned the lab and found the row of spirit tool crafting stations with their cold, metallic shine. With only levels 0.5 innate spirit power, growth would be painfully slow unless he could prove his worth and secure resources. His goal was simple: show he had value. He walked straight to the nearest station. Kong Deming watched, his face a study in thoughtful expectation. Without hesitation, Kong Ming'an picked up basic first-level spirit tool core base plate, a pale green metal half the size of a palm, mirror smooth, and the finest carving knife beside it. The foundational knowledge of spirit tooling, learned in this life, surfaced naturally. He began to channel his weak spirit power. It flowed agonizingly slow, each push feeling like wading through mud. Just as that faint power reached the tip of the knife and touched the base plate, something subtle flashed across Kong Ming'an's unflinching eyes, so quick it might have seemed imagined. The moment the blade met the metal, there was no usual glow. Instead, the hard metal softened under the knife, indenting as if it were a pliant, shapeable fluid. There was no raking or shavings. The blade moved over the plate like water over stone. Despite the spirit power's lethargy, the motions in Kong Ming'an's hand showed a strange penetrative quality. It was no longer merely force moving a tool. It felt like an invisible key working on the very energy structure of the metal, taming and reshaping it. The engraving, which normally required a precise fusion of spirit power, mental control, and craftsmanship, flowed with an eerie, seamless coherence. The invisible energy spirit seemed to resonate with the material energy of the tool itself. Time stretched in absolute quiet. Only the faint whisper of the knife on metal and Kong Ming'an's shallow breaths filled the room. The last arc closed. He set the knife down, fingers trembling. He had nearly exhausted his spirit power. Sweat pearled on his forehead, his face pale, but his eyes shone brighter than before. With a casual motion, he poured his final trickle of power into the core. Buzz, a soft, audible resonance. Not a blinding flare, but a stable, gentle blue halo pulsed like breathing, lighting up the delicate circuits on the core. It had activated. A standard first-level spirit tool core had been brought to life by a newly awakened spirit whose innate spirit power was only 0.5. Silence fell over the lab. The Level 9 soul engineers, who had been preparing to offer condolences, were struck dumb. This shouldn't have been possible. 0.5 spirit power was barely enough to operate a tool, let alone meticulously engrave and activate a core. They had seen grand sights, but none like this. Kong Deming moved so quickly a faint gust stirred the air. He scarcely seemed to notice the gentle blue glow. His gaze was fixed on the engraved circuit itself. He examined the grooves, so smooth they looked natural rather than cut, the faint shimmering light that flowed through them, the seamless union of circuit and base plate as if they were one. Energy, he breathed, his fingertips hovering over the core, trembling. So it can be interpreted this way? He exhaled slowly, then looked at his grandson. Gone was the worried elder's expression. In its place burned the feverish excitement of someone who had found new ground to explore. In a low, serious voice, he asked, "Ming'an, what do you want?" Kong Ming'an did not answer at once. He ignored the hungry curiosity in Kong Deming's eyes and the shocked faces around him. He simply watched the gently pulsing core, exhausted yet oddly calm. The pale blue light washed his tired face, and a small, relaxed smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Well, it wasn't a completely disastrous start, he thought. Chapter 2, The Method of Bodybuilding and the Beginning of Body Cultivation. Sun Moon Empire, Mingdu, Kong Family Residence. As head of the Hall of Worship, a pillar of the empire, and the most powerful person under the emperor, Kong Deming's home was not as ostentatious as one might expect. Compared with other imperial mansions, it was almost simple. Anyone who knew whose residence it was would sigh. Elder Kong is indifferent to fame and fortune. He truly is a pillar of the empire. In a small room, Kong Ming'an sat cross-legged on the bed, meditating. Nearly 60 hours had passed since he awakened his spirit, energy, and proved himself. All information about his awakened spirit, his innate spirit power rank, and the fact that he had forged a rank 1 soul core with only 0.5 rank innate spirit power had been sealed. The rank 9 soul engineers who witnessed it were trusted men of his grandfather, so keeping it quiet was easy, an indulgence well within his reach. None of that mattered to Kong Ming'an right now. His mind was focused on the faint but exceptionally clear spirit power inside him and the formless, omnipresent spirit called energy. What was energy? On the Douluo continent, spirit power is the foundation that drives a spirit and enables spirit abilities. It is the source of life and strength. Mental force, by contrast, is an extension of will, a bridge for perception and control. Both are forms of energy. Flow, transformation, and release. These fundamentals form the cornerstone of the Spirit Master system. The special aspect of Kong Ming'an's spirit was how powerfully it controlled and perceived this cornerstone. After more than 2 days of probing, he had tentatively identified 2 core abilities his spirit exhibited. First, extraordinary internal control. He had near-perfect command over the energy he wielded, his spirit power, and his mental force. That had been evident when he manually forged a rank 1 soul core in front of a room full of rank 9 soul engineers. That 0.5 rank of spirit power, faint as a candle in the wind, under his will showed no dispersion or lag, forming the intended shape flawlessly. Second, external energy vision. He discovered this during introspection. When he concentrated, he could see the flow of energy within roughly 5 meters around him. He could clearly perceive his own spirit power struggling but steadily coursing through his meridians, and his mental force like invisible ripples surrounding his body. Likewise, he could detect the spirit power fluctuations and mental force fields emitted by other living beings, as if observing halos of light or currents of air in the dark. Undeniably, his spirit was in some respects extremely powerful. But was it only control over spirit power and mental force? Kong Ming'an remained skeptical. His spirit's name was energy. If it only handled his own spirit power and mental force, the name felt almost undeserved. He suspected two possibilities. Either his spirit had some unmanifested limitation because his innate spirit power was so low, or because he currently only possessed spirit power and mental force as forms of energy, the spirit's scope was temporarily restricted. He would have to test them one by one. The thought excited him. This was far more interesting than dealing with the lab disasters his mentor and classmates caused in his previous life. He opened his eyes and looked at several exquisite jade bottles before him, medicinal pills his grandfather had sent after learning of his plans. There were 3 kinds in total, 2 developed by the Sun Moon Empire and 1 faintly wreathed in mist and cool aura, the Xuan water pill. Memories of the pill's description surfaced. A top-tier foundation-strengthening pill, it purified marrow and transformed tendons, improving innate spirit power aptitude. Its gentle water attribute life energy could nourish the meridians, clear impurities, and raise innate spirit power by 1 rank. Though it was a Xuanming sect specialty, the Sun Moon Empire had secretly purchased a supply to cultivate imperial talent. The bottle contained 5 Xuan water pills, enough to build a tolerance. This allocation reflected his value as the Kong family heir. He pulled the stopper. The pill smelled fresh. Without hesitation, he placed the lychee-sized azure pill on his tongue. It dissolved immediately, becoming a vast, cool torrent that surged through his limbs and acupoints. In his perception, the stream flowed through every meridian, gently widening channels that had been stagnant and flushing away the subtle impurities clinging to the meridian walls. Thread by thread, the pill's life energy integrated into his faint spirit power origin. After some time, the surging torrent subsided into a gentle stream, nourishing his renewed meridians. Kong Ming'an opened his eyes. A sharp glint flashed within them. He introspected. The once almost imperceptible stream was now visibly thicker and steadier, though still not fully smooth. Innate spirit power has roughly increased to about 1.5 rank, he murmured. In the original story, Huoguai's use of a Xuan water pill had different effects due to other factors, but Kong Ming'an's result was average, neither spectacular nor poor. Not a big problem. Just need to take a few more pills, he said casually. A low starting point was only a minor issue. Resources could compensate. Besides, it was only innate aptitude. He had defied fate before. This would be another attempt. He put the Xuan water pill and the other bottles away to let the effect settle, then washed in the bathroom to clear the impurities expelled by the pill. Dressed and ready, he opened the door. Outside stood a figure in the Sun Moon Empire's standard dark gold armor, aura solid as a mountain, restrained but still detectable in Kong Ming'an's energy vision as a dense furnace of spirit power, a titled Douluo. This was the guard and guide his grandfather had assigned. Kong Ming'an nodded. The titled Douluo understood and led him out. Their destination was the army garrison on Mingdu's outskirts, the reserve training camp for the Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Legion. On the vast training ground, thunderous shouts, heavy footsteps, and the whoosh of weapons braided into a raw torrent of power. Under the scorching sun, the scent of sweat and dust filled the air. Thousands of soldiers, stripped to the waist, endured brutal physical and basic spirit ability drills, standard daily training for reservists. They did not enter the center. Led by his escort, Kong Ming'an sat on a shaded step at the field's edge. The titled Douluo stood a few paces behind, blending into the background while forming an invisible barrier that insulated him from distractions. Soon, about a dozen Spirit Elder rank soldiers, led by an officer, arrived and halted before him. They performed the Sun Moon military salute. The officer knelt. "Young Master Ming'an, I am Wang Meng, your subordinate, waiting on orders from the Hallmaster. Please instruct us." Kong Ming'an studied Wang Meng's eager face for a moment, then waved. "Begin." Show me your spirit abilities that strengthen the body. One by one. Yes, Wang Meng replied and signaled the soldiers. The first man stepped forward, roared, and a gray bear phantom appeared. The soldier's muscles swelled as if pumped full of air. Coarse brown fur sprouted across his skin, and his hands became giant bear paws. He slammed his chest with a thud, breathed deeply, and his first spirit ring flashed open. Yellow light surged into his limbs and acupoints. His bulging muscles hardened, veins standing out like cords. Power poured outward. Kong Ming'an watched in silence, his energy vision active. Beneath the flesh and bone, he could clearly see the soldier's spirit power circulation. The roots were crude, but the eruption points aligned with certain acupoints known from his previous life's knowledge of traditional medicine. Points like Jianjing, Kusinli, and Yongquan, where spirit power concentrated during exertion. Spirit power stimulates acupoints in specific locations, protecting the meridians from overload and achieving short-term physique enhancement, he murmured. He saw his shortcomings clearly. The energy spirit was powerful, but relying on it alone would not suffice. With an innate aptitude of 0.5 rank, even with medicinal pills, there would be limits. Following the traditional spirit master path, raising rank, absorbing a spirit ring, then repeating, wouldn't work. He needed something far bigger. The first step was a sufficiently powerful physique. This was the start of a secondary development beyond the standard spirit master system and the beginning of obtaining an ideal configuration for his first spirit ring. Spirit abilities, physique enhancement, spirit power circulation routes, acupoint stimulation, drawing in external energy, he thought, as more soldiers came forward. One by one, they summoned spirits and activated similar body-enhancing techniques. His mind raced. The energy vision's raw underlying code, his previous life knowledge of meridians and acupoints, and his experience in precise control of internal energy began to collide, dissect, and recombine. What if the spirit power circulation routes were optimized? What if the acupoints that best develop potential and strengthen tendons, bones, and flesh were precisely targeted? What if mental force guided and drew in elemental power from the world more efficiently during body tempering, accelerating cultivation? What if, using his fine control of internal energy, he could create a method that didn't rely on high spirit power ranks, one that excavated the human body's own treasures and systematically strengthened the physique? A new concept took shape. He sat quietly, eyes deep as an abyss, scanning the soldier's spirit power flows and acupoint stimulations with his energy vision. His fingers traced faint lines on his knee as if mapping more efficient, intricate circulation routes in the void, marking critical energy nodes. Hours passed. Even with rotating spirit possession and repeated use of abilities, the dozen soldiers exhausted their spirit power and collapsed one by one. Kong Ming'an paused and frowned. Not enough samples, too little variety. I need more. He drew a handful of cards from his storage Soul Engineer bracelet and tossed them to Officer Wang Meng. 1,000 gold each. The rest is yours. Rotate people tomorrow and continue. Wang Meng caught them and saw more than 10 gold cards worth 1,000 gold each and one purple card worth 10,000 gold. His face lit up. Yes, sir? Another crisp imperial salute. Kong Ming'an ignored the display of gratitude. He stood, thinking as he walked away, the titled Douluo shielding him. The basic framework of the body tempering method he envisioned was built. What he needed next were large numbers of samples to refine it, actual cultivation to test it, and finally results. Since the foundational framework existed, the new system needed a name. He smiled slightly. Let's call it Body Cultivator. Time moved slowly. In the blink of an eye, more than half a year had passed. Over those 6 months, a single topic, neither trivial nor enormous, had taken hold in Mingdu's upper circles. At the center of it was Kong Ming'an, the only grandson of His Excellency Kong Diming, and no more than 6.5 years old. The reason was simple. Every morning, rain or shine, the young master was personally escorted by a titled Douluo to the military camp outside the city, always to the minute. He had done this since the day he awakened his spirit. For a child of 6, it was conspicuous. He did not attend school, nor did he study at the Hall of Worship. So what was he doing in the military camp all day? Rumors swirled privately, but none hit the mark. The Hall of Worship had tightly sealed any information about the young master's spirit and his innate spirit power. To outsiders, all that was certain was that he had awakened a spirit. The specifics remained a closely guarded secret. Another subject about Kong Ming'an traveled even faster. He was exceptionally handsome. Since his awakening, perhaps because of the spirit's influence, his temperament had taken on a calmness beyond his years. Combined with his refined features, anyone who had seen him was left impressed. Many high-ranking officials of the Sun Moon Empire, especially those with marriage-age daughters, could not help but consider alliance possibilities. After all, he was the sole blood heir of His Excellency Kong Deming, the Empire's pillar in soul engineering. In some respects, the young master of the Kong family enjoyed a status higher than that of many imperial princes. Approaching noon, at the Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Academy, the sun was bright, and the neatly trimmed flower beds smelled faintly of green growth. On a path through the campus walked two children, both about 6 years old and hard to miss. The girl moved with brisk steps. Her soft silver hair fell to her shoulders and glittered in the light, and her ice-blue eyes were not cold so much as clear and observant. Beside her was a boy whose hair was the same silver, but whose eyes were two different colors, one blue, one green, his expression carrying an unhidden pride. They were Meng Hongchen and Xiao Hongchen, grandchildren of Jing Hongchen, hallmaster of Mingda Hall and dean of the academy. "Hey, big brother," Meng Hongchen plucked at a leaf and tilted her head toward Xiao Hongchen. "I heard that Kong Ming'an is especially good-looking. He goes to the military camp every day. Do you think it's fun there?" Xiao Hongchen pouted. "So what if he's good-looking? Strength is what matters. He doesn't even come to the academy. What strength could he have?" The academy had a preparatory class. Talents like the Hongchens entered early to learn spirit tool theory, and with their family background, they'd been exposed to spirit tool concepts since infancy, so both were already attending second-year courses. "Tsk, be modest, big brother," Meng Hongchen chided in a mock adult tone. "Maybe he'll be your future opponent." "Humph, my only opponent is myself," Xiao Hongchen declared. Meng Hongchen looked helpless. She was beginning to suspect her brother was incurable. As they chatted, a group of people hurried from the nearby teaching building. The leader was tall and refined, wearing the ornate red robe of Mingde Hall, grandfather Jing Hongchen, followed by a few students. Jing Hongchen paused when he saw his grandchildren. "Meng, Xiao, what are you doing here?" he asked. "Grandpa," they replied in unison. Meng dashed forward. "We just finished class and were about to eat." Jing Hongchen nodded, considered for a moment, and then addressed a middle-aged man in the dark purple uniform of the Hall of Worship beside him. "Steward Lin, would it be convenient to take the two youngsters to broaden their horizons?" Steward Lin's gaze swept over the two finely made children. He inclined his head slightly. "Naturally, keep quiet." "Good," Jing Hongchen said, then tossed a small flying spirit tool to the pair. "Let's go." They rose together. Meng Hongchen whispered in midair, "Grandpa, where are we going?" "You'll see," Jing Hongchen said, though he cast a glance at Xiao Hongchen with the faintest smile. He hoped his grandson's Dao heart would not be broken. They left the academy and flew to Mingde Hall, which stood near the Sun Moon Imperial Palace. Passing through a heavily guarded section into a special corridor, the air grew dense. The walls gleamed with a metallic sheen that spoke of security. After a while, they reached the Hall of Worship's core laboratories. A heavy alloy door slid open with barely a sound, and a scent of metal energy and polished instruments drifted out. Inside the space was vast, filled with complex spirit tool apparatuses flickering with light. Researchers in dark purple uniforms moved among them. Steward Lin led the children and Jing Hongchen up to the second floor. The level was a large circular observation platform. A dozen or more people had gathered at the transparent protective wall, the mood solemn. Meng Hongchen recognized several familiar faces in that small cluster. The man with eyes like a starry sky was Ye Yulin, the Starry Sky Douluo, a name as well known as her grandfather's. Nearby stood the crown prince, Shu Tianran, only 17, whom her grandfather had said had a strong chance of becoming emperor. At the front, standing with stern posture and a dignified air, was Kong Deming. Whenever Jing Hongchen mentioned him, his own face grew serious, as if he held the man in awe. Everyone else chatting politely at the edges were powerful figures wearing 9-level Soul Engineer badges. In their presence, the two grandchildren felt oddly out of place. A pressure settled over little Meng Hongqin. She edged closer to the glass and focused on the experimental field below. In the center of the field stood a soldier, compact and heavily built like a small iron tower. He was connected to an array of spirit tool sensor cables and clad in simple armor designed to test joint strength, like a weapon under meticulous observation. Meng watched, curious to see if this was the world her grandfather had spoken of. But then, at the far corner of the experimental field, her eyes caught something that made her small body still. A young boy about her age sat quietly there. He wore a white robe, the sort reserved for researchers. His features were delicate, his expression too composed for a child, his ink-dark eyes fixed on the soldier in the field. His hands rested on his knees as if he were thinking, calculating. Meng blinked. Who was he, and why was he in the experimental field? He was so handsome. The boy captured her attention completely. She pressed to the edge of the crowd and stood on tiptoe, ice-blue eyes locked on him. Around her, the adults' murmured conversation drifted up, heavy with intent. Basic data recording complete. Elder Kong, do you think the energy dissipation rate can be optimized further this time? Your Highness, if this project succeeds, the improvement to the Sun-Moon Imperial Army's foundational combat power will be immeasurable. The key lies in the universality and stability of this method. The terms were above 6-year-old Meng Hongqin's head, but she felt the gravity of those words. Everyone's attention, until that moment fixed on the Iron Tower test subject, sat on the field. The atmosphere tightened. Then the boy in the corner moved. He rose without a sound, as precise and smooth as a machine part. The moment he straightened, a hum seemed to pass through the room. The murmurs on the observation platform cut off mid-sentence. Kong Deming lowered his gaze. Shu Tianran stepped forward, solemn. Jing Hongqin's face shifted to one of restrained astonishment. All the 9-level Soul Engineers and their attendants turned from the test subject and focused on that small figure who had just stood. The observation floor fell utterly silent. Meng Hongqin looked around at the important people, bewildered. The boy below lifted his eyes and looked toward the platform, not at anyone in particular, not seeking permission, but issuing a clear, unilateral declaration. His voice was steady and contained an unmistakable authority that carried through the thick protective barrier and the heavy quiet, ringing clearly in every corner of the laboratory. The 5th periodic demonstration of the results of the body tempering method practice now begins. In the experimental field, Kong Ming'an moved with deliberate calm. Once he had everyone's attention, his eyes fell on the soldier standing motionless on the field. As if introducing him, he spoke in a measured voice. Test subject number 037. Spirit, Windbreaker Bear, Intermediate Spirit. Innate Spirit Power, Rank 5, Age 20. Spirit Power, Rank 31. Has undergone systematic cultivation of the body tempering method for 5 months and 7 days. During cultivation, his spirit power broke through to rank 32, and the age of his 3rd spirit ring is 2,100 years. As he finished, the alloy door on the far side of the field slid open without a sound. A young soldier strode in, also in uniform, but without test cables or armor. He was well built, though a touch shorter than 037. His eyes were sharp, arrogant, and full of battle intent. A scalding aura trailed his steps. Kong Ming'an's gaze shifted to the newcomer, and his voice remained even. Opponent, a reserve soldier of the Sun-Moon Royal Soul Engineering Legion. Spirit, Blazing Flame Exploding Bear, Advanced Spirit. Innate Spirit Power, Rank 7, Age 18. Spirit Power, Rank 38. Has not cultivated the body tempering method. The age of his 3rd spirit ring is 1,500 years. Innate Spirit Power, Rank 7 versus Rank 5. Advanced Spirit versus Intermediate Spirit. Rank 38 versus Rank 31. 18 years old versus 20. On paper, the reserve soldier's advantage was overwhelming. On the 2nd floor platform, every eye was fixed on the 2 men below. Meng Hongqin unconsciously clutched the corner of Jing Hongqin's robe beside her, her ice-blue eyes wide and unblinking. Xiao Hongqin, next to them, temporarily shelved his usual arrogance. Confusion showed on his face. He didn't understand what was being set up. Kong Ming'an ignored the upstairs reactions. When both combatants were in position, he waved his hand casually. Begin. The command barely left his mouth when the reserve soldier howled and activated his spirit without hesitation. He had clearly been holding back for this ostensibly uneven test. Dark red fur covered his body. Muscles bulged, and his hands became gigantic claws wreathed in crimson flames. A fierce heatwave rolled outward. His first spirit ring flared yellow, and he launched himself like an ignited cannonball, rushing at 037 with blazing flames and a shriek of air. Speed, power, and overwhelming aura suppression, the advantages of an advanced spirit wielder, were on full display. But 037 remained unnervingly calm. He did not attach his spirit or ignite any spirit ring. He simply rooted himself, body settling into a basic defensive stance. Xiao Hongqian frowned. Not using spirit power at all, relying only on the physical body to withstand a spirit ability strike from a rank 38 advanced spirit master? Even if he were a newly fledged spirit elder, the gap in spirit quality and spirit power rank was real. It looked like courting death. The blazing claws slammed where 037 had been standing, but he had moved. The motion was minimal, precise to the millimeter. His body turned sideways just before the heat wave and claw shadows hit. The claws struck the alloy floor, leaving scorched marks, but missed their target. Astonishment flickered in the reserve soldier's eyes, but he didn't hesitate. His second ring flared. He swept his claws in a violent arc, and scorching fans of flame erupted, cutting off escape routes. His third ring pulsed purple, and he spat crimson fireballs directly toward 37's face. The spirit abilities flowed ruthless and practiced, combat honed. Yet 037 still did not use spirit power. He dodged each flaming projectile calmly and without hurry. Each evasion seemed to predict the trajectory, relying on pure physical coordination and reaction speed to sidestep attack after attack. Every muscle, every bone moved under absolute control. Xiao Hongqian watched, stunned. Was this a spirit elder? An intermediate spirit master who had just reached the spirit elder realm, using his physical body to suppress a long-established advanced spirit master on the cusp of spirit ancestor. How could this be? The reserve soldier's panic grew as the battle continued. His proud spirit abilities and the flame suppression of his advanced spirit lost effect against his opponent. His spirit power drained rapidly, and every strike felt like hitting cotton, useless. With a roar, he poured the rest of his spirit power into his third ring. It burst purple, flames enveloping him. He brought his claws together, condensing a wildly burning, blazing flame exploding bomb filled with terrifying energy, a desperate, all-out gamble. But just as the bomb was about to be released, a brief, critical moment of vulnerability, 037 acted. Still without any spirit ring light, relying solely on pure extreme physical strength, he closed the distance in an instant. Fine cracks spidered across the hard alloy beneath his feet as he became a blurred afterimage, and then struck. A simple, lightning-fast straight punch landed square on the reserve soldier's forward-tilted face. Bang! A dull, bone-jarring thud. The light of the exploding bomb vanished in an instant. The triumphant expression on the reserve soldier's face froze, then contorted into shock and pain. His body flew backward like a kite on a snapped string, smashed to the ground, rolled twice, and lay still, completely unconscious. 037 slowly withdrew his fist. His breathing was steady. Aside from sweat from the exertion, there were no obvious injuries. He glanced at the fallen opponent, then turned calmly toward Kong Ming'an. He bowed with respect, and at Kong Ming'an's casual wave, went over to the assistant researchers to begin the routine data recording. The second-floor platform was silent, quieter even than when Kong Ming'an had first stood. Every Rank 9 Soul Engineer and the high-ranking officials of the Sun Moon Empire who had been invited as witnesses stared in disbelief at the soldier who had felled a Rank 38 Advanced Spirit Master using only his physical body. Their eyes burned with astonishment and intensity. In that dead silence, Kong Ming'an's figure stood out sharply. He raised his head slowly, his gaze sweeping over the stunned faces on the platform as if what had occurred had been entirely expected. Without any hint of triumph, he spoke again in the same calm voice that belied his youth. This is the result of cultivating the body tempering method for 5 months. Are you satisfied? After a short silence, an involuntary gasp of astonishment erupted from the second-floor observation platform. To defeat an advanced spirit master, whose spirit rank is 7 levels higher, relying only on his physical body, a ninth-rank soul engineer muttered under his breath. It was one thing to fight above your rank by a level or two. It was another to overcome such a yawning gap with nothing but the body. He had never seen anything like it. 5 months. In just 5 months, this body tempering method can truly turn decay into divinity. Young Master Kong is a prodigy. He's grasped the fundamentals of energy and the human frame. A middle-aged man from the Hall of Worship spoke excitedly, eyes alight with the hunger of someone who dreamed of improvement. If this were applied to the Sun and Moon Soul Engineer Legion, never mind everything else, just the basic spirit tools and the load-bearing capacity of common weapons could change the balance on lower-tier battlefields. Ye Yulin, standing nearby, could not help but clap in admiration. Prince Shu Tianran remained silent, gaze fixed on Kong Ming'an below, his expression a swirl of shock, appraisal, and a barely hidden intensity. This was the look of a king's advisor. Amid the mostly heartfelt praise, Kong Deming, who stood at the front of the platform, preserved his customary composed demeanor, though a faint, nearly imperceptible trace of pride flickered in his eyes. "This is my grandson," he nodded slightly and said evenly. "You're all praising him too highly. Ming'an is still young. He needs more refinement and guidance." His words were modest, but protective. The others agreed hastily, tones deferential. At that moment, the elevator door behind them slid open, and Kong Ming'an stepped out. Hot, intent, admiring gazes refocused on him, but his expression barely changed. He ignored the stares and met his grandfather and the core figures with a calm voice. "There's no need for such praise. This is only the early-stage result of the body tempering method. After all, it's only been 5 months. More progress will require time and more resources." Jing Hongqian reacted fastest, eyes bright with the shrewdness of a businessman. "Mingde Hall will fully support continued research and development on this project. Resources, manpower, facilities, those are no problem." His words were decisive, stating Mingde Hall's position. Shu Tianran added slowly, his authority clear, "The Imperial Treasury will open funding as well." Support and opportunity surged toward the 6.5-year-old like a tide. Kong Ming'an inclined his head slightly, but felt oddly detached, as if this scene were a pitch meeting from another life, where venture capitalists waved offers about after his presentation. He refused the center of the exchange and looked to Kong Deming instead. "Grandpa, I don't know much about these things. You handle it." He walked over to an empty metal chair in the corner of the platform, sat, and removed himself from the flurry. Kong Deming allowed a helpless smile to flash across his face before regaining composure and taking the lead in negotiations. "Very well. Let's discuss cooperation and resource allocation in detail." In the corner, Kong Ming'an shut out the noise. He leaned against the cold chair back, eyes lowered, lost in thought about the body tempering method. The method worked. It could systematically and substantially strengthen a spirit master's physical base, compensate for spirit quality differences, raise the endurance ceiling of spirit rings, and even allow the early-stage practitioner to fight above their rank. But its drawbacks were obvious. Its ceiling. This technique, which used spirit power and mental focus to stimulate acupoints and draw in external elemental energy to temper muscles and bones, was fundamentally crude. It was like shaping iron with wood, effective in the early stage, but progressively impotent later on. The body, flesh, blood, muscles, bones, had hard limits. Simple spirit-powered tempering could not improve indefinitely. Once physical strength reached a certain threshold, any further gains would suffer a cliff-like drop in efficiency or stop entirely. A precise figure flashed through his mind, 0.32%. That was the average effectiveness for ordinary cultivators using the simplified body tempering method he had derived, only 21.32% of his own effect with the full method. The huge gap came from differences in spirit control and utilization efficiency. Not everyone could manipulate spirit power with his precision. Ming'an felt a small regret. 6 months and thousands of samples had produced a valuable technique, but flaws were inevitable. On the path of a body cultivator, this was only the beginning. There had to be more advanced approaches, ways to break the shackles of the mortal body, tap into deeper, more fundamental energy, or develop far more refined, efficient tempering techniques. That would be the way for body cultivators to truly diverge from and potentially surpass traditional spirit masters. Still, he was not impatient. An effect approaching one-fifth of his own power was already a transformative leap for low to mid-level spirit masters, especially for rank-and-file soldiers. It was enough to build a vast foundational group of body cultivators. That mass would become his sample library, a source of data for future body cultivator cultivation techniques. The current method and its near-term optimizations could meet the present stage's needs. He only needed to wait for the sample library to mature, collect the data, and continue deducing improvements. For now, the rest was the Sun and Moon leadership's business. Why else would he have shown them his results? It was mutual benefit. What worried him more immediately was his own cultivation. With the Schwan water pill and other medicines that could raise innate spirit power to some extent, his spirit had climbed from the original level 0.5 to level 5 in half a year. His innate spirit power settled around level 4. That was likely the limit of external material enhancement available to him right now. Even with full resources and maximum cultivation efficiency, and setting aside time for upcoming research and daily practice, he estimated he would reach level 10 between ages 8 and 9. Time was ample. Pure body cultivation is a bit too limiting and not flashy enough, he mused. He wanted to find an opportunity to recruit Jijuechen and to acquire the Sun and Moon's lifespan spirit tool technology. Tool cultivator, or rather, sword cultivator. His thoughts drifted, turning over possibilities. Two gazes then fell on him, different from the profit-seeking, astonished, or scrutinizing looks from the platform. These were pure curiosity, laced with a burning battle intent. Ming'an looked up and saw, not far behind Jing Hongchen, a silver-haired, blue-eyed little girl as delicate as porcelain, her wide eyes fixed on him in undisguised wonder and an innocent, unabashed appreciation of so handsome. Beside her stood a silver-haired boy with heterochromatic eyes. He stared at Ming'an with intense gravity. Ming'an's gaze passed briefly over the girl, less than half a second, then met the boy's burning stare. He showed no expression, returned a perfunctory nod, and lowered his eyes again, lost once more in thoughts of his first spirit ring. The girl, Meng Hongchen, blinked and whispered softly to the boy beside her, "Big brother, he's really, really handsome." The boy, Xiao Hongchen, was oblivious to the gush of admiration. Ming'an's slight nod had only stoked the fire in his eyes. He turned toward Meng Hongchen with a more serious tone. "Little sister, you're right. He is my true opponent." Meng Hongchen made a puzzled sound. "Did I say something?" "No. Wait, is Big Brother trying to steal my handsome young man?" Small Meng Hongchen bristled with sudden vigilance toward her brother. The shock and clamor in the laboratory didn't last long. Under Kong Deming's direction, preliminary agreements on cooperation and resource allocation for the body tempering method project were quickly reached. Before long, the high officials of the Sun Moon Empire began to depart one by one, preparing to return and arrange the resources that had been promised. Xu Tianran, however, stopped and approached Kong Ming'an with a gentle smile before leaving. "Young Master Kong's talent is extraordinary. Today's achievement has truly opened my eyes. If you have time in the future, you are welcome to visit my manor for a chat." There was a polite undertone of both flattery and recruitment. Kong Ming'an simply lifted his eyes to meet the future emperors, then inclined his head slightly. "Certainly." He spoke neither immodestly nor obsequiously. Su Qianren's eyes flashed for a moment, and he said nothing more, departing with his retinue. Jing Hongchen, walking at the rear with his grandson and granddaughter, noticed something in their exchange and paused. Smiling, he said to Kong Deming, "Old Kong, the children are similar in age. Perhaps they could interact more in the future. Meng and Xiao could use companions at the academy." Kong Deming responded vaguely, "Ming'an is quiet and dislikes crowds. Children have their own fates. It's best to let things take their natural course." Jing Hongchen nodded, patted his grandchildren on the heads, and left the lab. Meng kept glancing back while Xiao watched intently. The heavy alloy door closed silently, cutting off the outside bustle. On the broad second floor of the lab, only Kong Deming and Kong Ming'an remained. The machines hummed softly. The silence between grandfather and grandson felt peculiar. They didn't discuss the body tempering method that had stunned everyone or the flood of resources about to arrive. Kong Deming crossed the room. Instead of taking a nearby chair, he leaned on the back of a large metal seat, his usual authoritative expression softened into genuine concern. He reached out and patted Kong Ming'an's shoulder. His voice was low and warm, very different from the hallmaster's tone in front of others. "Ming'an," he said, "you've been pushing yourself too hard lately." Kong Ming'an blinked. "Have I?" "Zhou Ping told me you haven't had much rest recently." Zhou Ping was the Kong family's butler. Because Kong Deming was always busy with government affairs and research on spirit tools, Zhou Ping often handled the family's day-to-day matters. Kong Ming'an fell silent for a moment. He hadn't been a soul transmigrator, but memories from his previous life had resurfaced. In those recollections, he'd been an orphan. In this life, he'd found a family and a grandfather who cared for him between his busy tasks. A smile eased across his face. "Don't worry, Grandpa. I know what I'm doing. The beginning is always the hardest. Once we get started, the rest will be easier." Kong Deming nodded, trusting him without asking for details. "It's enough that you know what you're doing." They chatted about small, trivial things. Kong Deming didn't press him about the source of his astonishing ideas, and Kong Ming'an didn't bring up the intricate deductions and data that had taken shape in his mind. They sat together quietly, peaceful. That afternoon, in Mingdu, the Kong family manor, sunlight streamed through an intricately carved window and warmed the study's soft carpet. After a light meal, Kong Ming'an summoned Butler Zhou. The old servant had been with the family for decades, loyal and utterly reliable. He stood respectfully, hands at his sides. "Young master, what would you like?" he asked deferentially. Kong Ming'an sat behind a desk slightly too large for him, his hands clasped on the wood. "Uncle Joe, how are the soft-boned rabbit breeding farm and the blue-silver grass cultivation base progressing? Is everything going smoothly?" Butler Joe's face showed a professional, knowing smile. He was clearly well informed. "Reporting to young master, everything is proceeding steadily according to your plans. Progress is very smooth." The soft-boned rabbit farm is located in an area with gentle spirit power. The breeding rabbits we introduced were selected for adaptability and stable reproduction. Per your instructions, their feed includes trace amounts of herbs that encourage gentle spirit power absorption. The young rabbits' growth rates and physiques are well above average, and their temperaments are calmer and easier to manage. As for the blue-silver grass cultivation base, Joe continued, it was chosen in a valley with vigorous earth vein energy. With the rotating spirit power nourishing formation you provided, the blue-silver grass is thriving. Its leaves are thick, and the life force in its roots and stems is purer and stronger. The first batch of transplanted, high-quality blue-silver grass has taken root stably. Establishing a large-scale field is only a matter of time. Kong Ming'an nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly what he needed. Stable, controllable, quality-enhanced sources of spirit beast and material resources. "Very good," he said. "Proceed with the plan. Keep observing and recording every subtle change. Don't hold back on investment. Guarantee quality. Once the soft-boned rabbits reach 10 years cultivation, send a few to my laboratory first." "Yes, young master. This old servant understands." Butler Zhao replied with a bow, then withdrew. The study fell quiet again. Kong Ming'an's expression was calm. The soft-boned rabbit farm and the blue-silver grass base were part of his next steps. The seemingly odd pairing had been more practical than whimsical. Blue-silver grass was the material he wanted for his experiments, and soft-boned rabbits would replace the mice he'd used in his previous life. He had simply asked for spirit beasts with short breeding and maturation cycles, and Butler Zhao recommended soft-boned rabbits. He could hardly resist. He had some interesting plans for his first spirit ring. Ordinary 100 or 1,000-year spirit rings would be dull. He wanted something different. That required methodical practice. Raising low-level spirit beasts like soft-boned rabbits was straightforward. With a little technique and diligence, he could produce a cohort of 10-year cultivation rabbits almost every year. Those 10-year rabbits could drop spirit rings when sacrificed, exactly the research material he needed. and adhering to his principle of making full use of resources, the meat from the deceased rabbits could be put to culinary use. Cold rabbit dishes, spicy rabbit heads, and so on. Nothing would go to waste. Chapter 7. Body Repair. Time flew, and another 2 months slipped quietly past the city walls of Mingdu. Beneath the placid surface of the Empire's capital, however, undercurrents churned. Several main Imperial legions were being secretly expanded and re-equipped at full throttle. Vast resources were mobilized and consolidated, all in service of a project codenamed Cornerstone, issued by the Hall of Worship. Trainees practicing the body tempering method were quietly promoted from ordinary soldiers to instructors and began, almost silently, to reshape the physiques of the Empire's lower ranks. All of this circulated only within the tightest circles. To the outside world, everything remained calm. Inside the Kong family manor, in the backyard training ground, Meng Hongchen asked, "Ming'an, can drinking this really make you stronger?" "Guaranteed." Kong Ming'an smiled lightly as he looked at Meng Hongchen and at Xiao Hongchen, who stood not far away with a similarly uncertain expression while holding their potions. A month earlier, the two had been dispatched to him by Jing Hongchen under the pretext of peer exchange and mutual progress. Kong Ming'an had seen through Jing Hongchen's real motive at a glance, to build a connection. At first, he'd been puzzled. Logically, his grandfather should have refused. Instead, his grandfather had personally brought Meng Hongchen and Xiao Hongchen over, along with Jing Hongchen as a tag-along, and spoken with a seriousness that threw Kong Ming'an off. Later, when he looked into his grandfather's eyes, he understood. The old man was worried about him staying cooped up in the lab all the time and wanted him to meet peers for his own mental well-being. There was no reason to refuse, so he agreed. This potion will, to a certain extent, increase the efficiency of body tempering method cultivation. Don't waste it. He picked up his portion and, as if demonstrating, downed it in one gulp. The effect was immediate and the taste indescribable. After a brief inward grimace, Kong Ming'an moved to the center of the training ground. He took a steady breath, assumed a stance, and began his body tempering method routine. Horse stance, opening and closing pushes, bow-stanced punches, and a variety of odd stretches that twisted and compressed muscles and bones. The movements weren't flashy, the gestures were merely auxiliary. What mattered was the spirit power flowing inside him. As that power activated his acupoints, the skin across his body flushed crimson, and wisps of scorching white qi issued from his pores, pooling into a hazy steam that enveloped him. Heat radiated outward. For a moment, the training ground felt several degrees hotter. Beneath his skin, muscles and fascia writhed and tightened like coiling dragons. Tiny, dense snaps sounded in his bones. Watching this, Xiao Hongchen swallowed and, as if steeling himself, tossed back his potion with a gulping gug-gug-gug. "Together," he said through the burning aftertaste and the heat that crawled down into his stomach. He came to Ming'an's side, assumed a stance, and began his own cultivation. Must it always be a competition? Meng Hongchen couldn't fathom her brother's impulse, but once both had drunk the potion, her small face fell. She pinched her nose, closed her eyes, and resignedly swallowed her portion with a thump. Ugh, so bitter, so spicy, and sour. Tears pricked at her eyes as she stuck out her tongue and fanned herself with tiny hands, feeling as if she were on fire. She watched the two crimson figures like steamed shrimp through the wavering heat and felt her face go pale. This was supposed to be a pleasant practice session with a handsome young man, so how had it turned into this? Despite her reluctance, she gritted her teeth and staggered to join them. The heat waves within the training ground intensified. Time crawled by in agonizing torment. At noon, Kong Ming'an finally ended his practice. The crimson color drained from his skin and the steam dissipated, leaving him warm and slick with a fine layer of sweat. He exhaled slowly and calmly, as if the furnace-like session had been merely a warm-up. The Hongchen siblings, drenched in sweat and panting, still lingered to recover. They had taken less of the potion than he had and needed more time to digest its effects, an outcome of their lower cultivation efficiency. Even so, with the potion's aid, their efficiency reached roughly 40% of Kong Ming'an's, double their usual 20. Kong Ming'an didn't leave. He sat cross-legged at the edge of the training ground and closed his eyes, guiding his spirit power along precise channels to probe the condition of his meridians and physique. 8 months had passed since his awakening. The first 3 months had been a difficult period of exploration, trial and error, deduction, and constant adjustments to the body tempering method on himself. The last 5 months had been a time of astonishing gains from that method. The results were undeniable. Although his spirit power rank continued to rise at the usual pace, his physical strength climbed far faster than his spirit rank. Through exact soul engineer instrument tests and his own assessments, his comprehensive physical indicators, pure bodily strength, defense, speed, reflexes, and endurance, had reached the level of a rank 20 advanced beast spirit master in spirit avatar state. All this had been achieved without a first spirit ring attached, and with no spirit power bonus to his physique. At the current rate, Kong Ming'an estimated that within a year, through continuous body tempering method cultivation and deeper excavation of his body's potential, his physique could challenge the spirit ancestor level. That would mark the end of the rapid progress phase of the method. With about 10 months left after that, plus a stash of 10,000-year whale resin and several other heaven and earth treasures prepared to strengthen foundations, cultivate origins, and temper muscles and bones, he might be able to push the body close to a Spirit King baseline before he turned 9 and before his spirit power rank neared rank 10. This was his first step toward attempting a 10,000-year first spirit ring. A 10,000-year first spirit ring sounded outrageous? Kong Ming'an snorted inwardly. With the entire Sun Moon Empire's resources leaning his way, and several Soul Engineer legions and reserve legions of quality soldiers serving as a sample pool to continuously refine the body tempering method, it wasn't impossible. Attempting a 100-year or even a 1,000-year first spirit ring would be embarrassing by comparison. He did not ignore the method's limits, though. It's a pity, he thought. According to current data, the pure body tempering method effect begins to taper off at Spirit Ancestor. It falls to 1/5 of its original power after Spirit King, crawls like a turtle at Spirit Emperor, and hits its ceiling by Spirit Saint. Easy to get into, hard to master, and it's even more dependent on innate talent than the traditional Spirit Master system in the late stages. Body cultivation was still a tough path. Kong Ming'an wasn't overly disappointed. This was only the present. He had time, resources, and a plan. He closed his eyes and let his spirit power circulate, feeling the faint hum of potential in his limbs and bones. Outside the training ground, the city of Mingdu went on, unaware of the slow, steady forging taking place inside the manor's walls. Chapter 8. Cabbage-Eating Pig. After cultivation, there was a specially prepared medicated meal to help recover what the body had lost. Xiao Hongqian picked at his food weakly. He was in much worse shape than Miss Meng beside him. Because someone had left early, Xiao Hongqian's competitive streak had driven him to force a breakthrough in the body tempering method, accelerating his cultivation. The payoff was exhaustion. Xiao, you don't need to push yourself so hard. With your talent, cultivating step by step and using the body tempering method, reaching level 20 by 9 and attaching a 1,000-year spirit ring won't be hard, Kong Ming'an said, worried, to his little friend. I know, Xiao Hongqian rubbed his temples. He felt a vague headache. I just don't understand. He had innate full spirit power, a top-tier spirit in the form of a 3-legged golden toad with a divine beast bloodline and the spirit talent of metal control, perfect for a soul engineer. From the moment he awakened his spirit until 2 months ago, Xiao Hongqian had considered himself the continent's #1 genius. It wasn't an empty boast. The potential had been real. But after following his grandfather Jing Hongqian out to see the world 2 months ago, doubts crept in. Who was the person in front of him? He thought the man was like him, naturally powerful, innately full spirit power. A month ago they'd sparred. Xiao Hongqian was beaten so badly he could barely stand. Later, he found out the man had only 0.5 innate spirit power. The revelation stung. Xiao Hongqian sighed and looked at Kong Ming'an. He could tell the other man's body tempering progress was far ahead. His cultivation results were several times better, but the pain he endured had been much greater too. Still, looking at Kong Ming'an, who seemed perfectly fine and then at his own useless hands, Xiao Hongchen couldn't help speaking. Honestly, even now I can't quite believe your innate spirit power is 0.5. The level of innate spirit power has nothing to do with intelligence, Kong Ming'an replied calmly. Intelligence, Xiao Hongchen muttered, mulling the word. His brain itched oddly. He couldn't quite place the feeling. Miss Meng blinked. Her expression shifted subtly. Was he saying her brother wasn't intelligent? Her ice-blue eyes lifted and met Kong Ming'an's. She blinked again, a look of curiosity and a touch of questioning. Kong Ming'an was taken aback, then blinked back, a faint smile forming on his lips as he nodded. Miss Meng brightened, but unconsciously averted her gaze and cleared her throat to stop herself laughing out loud. Her older brother sometimes didn't use his head much. She couldn't laugh, though. Wouldn't want to hurt his pride. Xiao Hongchen, feeling the itch in his head subside, noticed his sister and the man exchanging looks. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I treated him as a rival, and he's hitting on my sister? In an instant, Xiao Hongchen's eyes flared with battle intent. Kong Ming'an stared. No, had this guy taken the wrong medicine? Bearing renewed determination, Xiao Hongchen threw himself into cultivation right after lunch. Body tempering in the morning, meditation in the afternoon, spirit tool study in the evening, and meditation instead of sleep. He filled his schedule to the brim and vowed to challenge that certain person again after gaining his second spirit ring. Watching Xiao Hongchen stomp off, Kong Ming'an's mouth twitched. He glanced at Miss Meng. Your brother. He? Miss Meng massaged her forehead. It's nothing. He'll be fine after a while. She sounded helpless and amused, as if this had happened before. Then she reached for Kong Ming'an. Come on, Ming'an. You promised to study with me today. Don't go back on your word. She took his hand as naturally as breathing and led him toward the laboratory. Xiao Hongchen hadn't gone far when he turned and saw his sister pulling the man away. The good cabbage was being snatched by a pig? While Xiao Hongchen reeled from the thought, the cabbage and pig pair were already at the laboratory. The lab was bright and fully equipped. As a facility occasionally used by Kong Ming'an's grandfather, it was top class, on par with a 9th grade Soul Engineer's workshop. Miss Meng scanned the room with interest. She'd often visited her grandfather, Jing Hongchen's lab as a child, so many things looked familiar. What caught her attention most were the cages neatly stacked beside the experimental platform, and the soft-furred, soft-bones rabbits in each one. This is, she murmured. Materials, Kong Ming'an said simply, watching Miss Meng's reaction. He'd been thinking of finding an assistant for a while. Most research couldn't be done alone. A capable assistant could multiply his efficiency. If he'd had a few assistants during the foundational months of the body tempering method, 3 months of difficult exploration might have been cut to 1. He'd been too busy at the time to recruit, but now he had space, and Jing Hongchen had just the playmates to fill the role. After a month of getting along, Miss Meng had naturally become an assistant in training. Xiao Hongchen, on the other hand, was better suited as a hands-on, experimental executor, practical work rather than theoretical research. Under Miss Meng's puzzled gaze, Kong Ming'an walked to a cage and casually picked up a pure white soft-bones rabbit. His breeding farm wasn't mature yet. This one had been purchased from the Spirit Beast Forest and was sturdier than the usual samples, its eyes showing a hint of spirit. Sensing danger, the rabbit began to struggle wildly, trying to escape. Kong Ming'an ignored it. He twisted its neck to the right and ended its life in one motion. Miss Meng flinched. Then a soft light blossomed from the rabbit's corpse. Spirit power rippled faintly, and a pale, iridescent white spirit ring rose into the air. Kong Ming'an reached out, caught it, and held it up. Chapter 9. On Soul Ring's Self-Editing and Reconstruction. Kong Ming'an lowered his gaze. Thin threads of blue spirit power rose from his fingertips, winding around the pure white spirit ring suspended in his palm, making it look dreamlike and fragile. Meng Hongchen stared, stunned. Could a spirit ring be touched directly, or was it being bound and manipulated by spirit power? She thought back. Wasn't this how one absorbed a spirit ring? Kong Ming'an spoke slowly. Meng, what do you think a spirit ring is? A spirit ring? Meng Hongchen blinked. She was puzzled at first by the question, but seeing his serious expression, she hesitated, then recited the textbook definition out of habit. A spirit ring is a special energy entity left after a spirit master defeats a spirit beast. When a spirit master reaches a bottleneck, absorbing a spirit ring allows them to break through. After absorption, a spirit ring grants a unique spirit ability. A spirit master's control of spirit power is linked to their own spirit and the spirit beast that produced the ring. Kong Ming'an nodded, not refuting her, then pressed on. Besides attaching a spirit ring to break a bottleneck and gain a spirit ability, Meng, do you know of any other uses for a spirit ring itself? Meng was stumped again and shook her head instinctively. Her silver-white hair rustled. Isn't a spirit ring just for absorbing to gain abilities? In the understanding of most spirit masters, a spirit ring was simply the ladder of advancement and source of power. Attach, absorb, and use the spirit ability. Kong Ming'an only half smiled and kept his eyes on the ring in his palm, appreciating it like a delicate artifact. Among the records I've gathered, there are several peculiar ways to use spirit rings. He recited in a calm, measured voice. Ancient texts say that 10,000 years ago, a protective elder of the Nine Treasures glazed tile sect mastered ring embedding, which let him embed a spirit ring into his own spirit to double its effect. The dark underworld sect of the Heaven Soul Empire, whose inheritance carries a special divine beast bloodline, can temporarily combine and fuse spirit rings, allowing a spirit ancestor to wield a 10,000-year spirit ring for a time and massively boost their power. There's also a technique called spirit ring fusion, which can merge rings of different attributes into a single one, changing its attribute and amplifying its power. Each name, every technique, sounded like the opening of a sealed doorway of power. Meng Hongqin's ice-blue eyes widened. So spirit rings could be used like that? Kong Ming'an didn't wait for her to absorb it. The blue spirit threads around the ring in his hand suddenly thinned into sharp needles and pierced the ring's seemingly stable energy structure. A sudden flare. Buzz! The pure white ring erupted with blinding light and became volatile. Its previously gentle energy tremors turned wild. Danger radiated from it. Meng instinctively took a step back. Calmly, Kong Ming'an tossed the ring into a transparent isolation box of high-strength, explosion-proof spirit tool glass. The moment the box sealed, boom, a muffled yet powerful explosion tore through the small chamber. White light and chaotic energy surged, filling the isolated space. Array patterns on the glass walls flared to life, flickering as they strained to contain the destructive energy. Nothing escaped. When the light finally ebbed, only wisps of chaotic current remained, and the Softbones Rabbit's spirit ring had vanished as if it had never existed. Meng stared. What was that? This is ring explosion, Kong Ming'an said, withdrawing his hand as if he'd merely popped a bubble. It's a technique that violently detonates and releases the massive energy stored in a spirit ring, the energy used to sustain spirit abilities and amplify spirit power. He glanced at the residual currents inside the box and continued. That blast just now was roughly equivalent to a level 3 fixed-load spirit tool bomb. In some sects, they detonate rings this way to temporarily boost power on the battlefield, and they've built entire combat methods around it. Meng listened intently. What began as curiosity about hidden knowledge had become fascination after seeing it firsthand. She quickly picked out the implications and, nervous and excited, raised her hand like a diligent student. Kong Ming'an noticed her eagerness and chuckled. Want to learn ring explosion? Meng opened her mouth. No. He watched her react with a half-amused look. Meng tried to play it cool and said nothing more, but inwardly she was disappointed. The thing had been displayed like a temptation and then withheld, frustrating, but not unexpected. Kong Ming'an's expression stayed level. It's not that I won't teach you, he said. It's that there's no need. No need? Yes. He produced another Softbones rabbit, twisting its neck and drawing out another pure white spirit ring. He held it casually and spoke slowly. A simple ring explosion is the crudest way to use a spirit ring's energy. He leaned in, as if posing the core question. If the energy of a ring can be detonated and guided to amplify combat power, could that energy be used for something more extreme, like forcing a breakthrough? Imagine releasing the massive energy of a ring at once to shatter a cultivational bottleneck, a spirit grandmaster breaking to spirit elder, a spirit emperor to spirit saint, or a spirit Douluo to title Douluo? He paused, eyes reflecting an eager curiosity. Or could you constrain and shape the burst from a ring explosion to make it a controllable, repeatable offensive or defensive tool? Consider this, a 10-year spirit ring's explosion equals a level 3 spirit tool bomb. What about a 1,000-year ring? 10,000? 100,000 years? You should understand that spirit rings recover over time after an explosion. That means, theoretically, you could repeatedly use the equivalent of a level 9 fixed-load spirit tool bomb indefinitely. Meng's breath caught, and you wouldn't have to half-kill yourself every time you used it. Kong Ming'an's voice lowered, enthusiasm creeping into it. Even? Under her gaze, his lips curled. His tone grew almost feverish with the thrill of exploration. Is it possible to completely destroy a spirit ring's structure, to erase the spirit ability data and the spirit beast imprint it contains, and keep only its pure energy origin? Then, attach a newly crafted ring to yourself, achieving what I call the self-editing and reconstruction of a spirit ring. Chapter 10. Soul Ring. Isn't it magical? Meng Hongqian stood frozen, her mind buzzing. Ring explosion cultivation? Controllable ring explosion? Explode and then be replaced? And self-editing and reconstruction of a spirit ring? This overturned everything she knew about spirit rings. They could be played with like this? She murmured, bewildered and shocked. Spirit rings, they can be used in so many unbelievable ways? Of course, Kong Ming'an smiled, amused by the stunned look on Miss Meng's face. In a tone that was at once light and serious, he began, anything that follows rules can be understood, utilized, and eventually broken, turned into nourishment for new rules. That's what I want. Meng Hongqian's ice-blue eyes flickered. The words she had just heard had opened up a brand new world for her. Compared to the Spirit Master and Soul Engineer world the Academy taught, what Kong Ming'an was showing her was infinitely more interesting and grand. Her eyes brightened. The excitement in her gaze shifted to a focused seriousness. You want to teach me? You will? Yes. Her anticipation had been braced for refusal. She was startled into joy. After a heartbeat, she looked up to check his expression and then could hardly believe what she saw. Really? I can? You can, but Kong Ming'an's lips curved. Answer a question for me first. If your answer satisfies me, I'll teach you. Meng hesitated for a second, then said seriously, all right. He nodded and let his gaze fall on the translucent white spirit ring in his hand. This time, he didn't detonate it. Instead, he covered his palm with a layer of precise, gentle spirit power and slowly tightened his grip. There was no violent burst of energy, no dazzling light. Under the guidance and kneading of the spirit power threads in his palm, the perfectly round, the stable ring began to deform like soft putty. Its smooth edges stretched and twisted by an invisible force, taking on an irregular, kneaded shape, like dough. The ring still pulsed with light and energy fluctuations, but its physical form had been forcibly altered. The bizarre, almost magical sight made Meng Hongqian hold her breath, staring so hard she was afraid of missing a single detail. Maintaining the deformed shape, Kong Ming'an looked at her and spoke slowly. If a spirit ring can be artificially deformed and hold that shape for a long time, what new ideas would that suggest about the ring itself? New ideas? Meng frowned, eyes fixed on the kneaded ring. Spirit ring, deformation, long-term maintenance. Her thoughts collided and reassembled. A spirit ring is an energy body. An energy body can be shaped, and maintained. Long-term maintained shaped energy body. Suddenly, a flash of insight cut through the fog. A concept she knew intimately popped into her mind. A spirit tool? Like a spirit tool? You mean using a spirit ring like metal, using it to construct a spirit tool? She blurted, excitement distorting her voice. Kong Ming'an's mouth curved in approval. Her curiosity, associative ability, and readiness to infer other possibilities were exactly what he needed in an assistant. He nodded. Correct. Relief escaped her without her noticing. She looked from his satisfied face to the deformed ring in his hand and back to the idea she'd shouted out. This subversive possibility made her half laugh at how absurd it felt. Still, she hesitated, asking softly, Really? Can it be done like that? Kong Ming'an smiled and didn't answer directly. He reached out with his left hand and plucked a soft-bones rabbit from a nearby cage. Under her gaze, he expertly twisted the creature's neck to the right, a translucent white spirit ring emerged, and he grasped it. Blue spirit power threads sprang into being, exactly as they had when he had performed the ring explosion moments before. Meng took a step back. His movements were identical to the earlier demonstration. Before she could steady her thoughts, she saw him let the threads permeate the ring. Buzz! The translucent white ring flared brightly as it had before. But this time, Kong Ming'an didn't toss it into the isolation box. Instead, he raised his right hand, and the kneaded ring in his palm flowed, stretched, and solidified like liquid metal. In an instant, a glove, thin as a cicada wing and glowing with a steady, translucent white, formed seamlessly over his entire hand. Calmly, at the very moment the ring detonated, his gloved right hand spread its 5 fingers and closed, precisely around the exploding ring. Hiss! The earth-shattering blast Meng had expected never came. There was a harsh, grating sound, as if space itself were being squeezed and torn. She watched, speechless, as the explosive energy, powerful enough to melt steel, met an invisible barrier the moment it erupted against the translucent white glove. The violent energy thrashed and roared within the 5-fingered cage, but couldn't break past the glove's edge by even a hair's breadth. The entire detonation was locked firmly inside his palm. Under this absolute restraint, the explosion was like a fire that had had its fuel snuffed, the light dimmed visibly. Within a few breaths, an attack equivalent to the blast of a level 3 fixed-load spirit tool cannonball collapsed and dissipated under the glove's control, reduced to nothing. Kong Ming'an simply stood there, then slowly withdrew his gloved hand, as casual as if nothing had happened. Meng Hongqin's face went pale. The instant transformation of a ring into a glove, the grabbing of an exploding ring with bare or seeming hands, the annihilation of energy through confinement, was this real? Kong Ming'an's right hand, still covered by the translucent glove, shone faintly like a part of his skin. Then, as if its energy had been spent, it broke apart into specks of starlight and drifted away. He revealed his unharmed fair palm and glanced at Meng Hongqin's small, stunned face. A faint smile touched his lips. With a hint of casual amusement, he said, "Spirit rings. Aren't they amazing?" Xiao Hongqin had been noticing that his younger sister had been acting oddly lately. It wasn't just that she went to Kong Ming'an's cold laboratory every day without complaint. After all, following someone to cultivate could be worth it. The medicine was unbearably bitter, and the body-tempering method kept updating, forcing her to relearn things, but her cultivation and physique had improved fast. No, it wasn't that. What really worried him was what Meng Hongqin did after she got home. Every time she returned from the lab, she carried a thick stack of books or notebooks and read so intently she often didn't hear her own brother calling her. He could tolerate that. What made his heart race was the content of those books. He had sneaked a few glances at the covers. Detailed explanations of human meridians and acupoints, treatise on the circulation of tendons, bones, qi and blood, preliminary exploration of the origin of life. There was even an atlas of human physiological structure. Even more alarming were her meals. Meng had always been picky and loved sweets, but she usually had a healthy appetite. Lately, though, she would wrinkle her nose at the sight of the dishes, cover her mouth, and look like she was suppressing nausea. Reading anatomy books, getting queasy at meat, and running to Kong Ming'an's place every day. Those keywords clicked into place in Xiao Hongqin's head until a terrifying conclusion formed. He couldn't hold it in any longer. After lunch one day, he pulled Kong Ming'an aside. "Kong Ming'an, be honest. What have you done to my sister?" Kong Ming'an blinked, caught off guard by the unusual seriousness and indignation in Xiao Hongqin's voice. He stared back blankly. What had he done? He'd only compiled some teaching materials for her, had her help record experimental data, explained a few basic energy theories, and let her start some hands-on work. That was it. "Don't play dumb," Xiao Hongqin snapped. Seeing Kong Ming'an's innocent face made him angrier. "Meng's been reading those books about human meridians every day. She gags at the sight of food, and she goes to your place all the time. He paused and lowered his voice to a grave tone. "You have to take responsibility for her." Kong Ming'an had to think for a moment. He turned to the nearby dining table and saw Meng pushing away a spicy rabbit head, face creased in disgust. He glanced back and forth between her expression and the plate, Then to Xiao Hongqin's words about anatomical books. A somewhat absurd but strangely fitting misunderstanding began to form. He rubbed his forehead. You're overthinking it. I really haven't done anything. As for why she feels nauseous, maybe it's because she's been having extra meals these past few days. Since the spirit ring experiments began, dozens of soft-boned rabbits had to be killed in the lab every day. Throwing them away felt wasteful, so someone came up with 100 ways to cook rabbit. The new dishes tasted good, and Meng had been eating a lot of them. With all those extra snacks, she naturally had no appetite for the main meals. Extra meals? Xiao Hongqin narrowed his eyes, unconvinced. Was this really the reason for her reaction? He was ready to accuse Kong Ming'an of shirking responsibility, but before he could, Meng stuck her head out. She saw Kong Ming'an's helpless expression and her brother's aggressive face and drew her own conclusion. "Brother, what are you trying to do now?" she asked, sounding annoyed. Xiao Hongqin gaped. "No, sister, it's not me you should be asking." He opened his mouth, but Meng had already wrapped her arm around Kong Ming'an and pulled him in. "Ming'an is very good to me, big brother. You focus on your cultivation. Don't worry about me." She led him away. Xiao Hongqin watched them go, stiff with a mixture of resentment and helplessness. He wasn't angry at Kong Ming'an per se, he just felt his sister was giving herself away too quickly and might get taken advantage of. Still uneasy, he decided to tell his grandfather about it. A few hours later, Kong Deming arrived at the lab with Jing Hongqin. Once the misunderstanding was cleared up, everyone relaxed. Jing Hongqin, who had been torn between worry and relief, let out a breath and left with Xiao Hongqin and Meng Hongqin. After they left, only grandfather and grandson remained. "I didn't expect you to come all the way here for this," Kong Ming'an said softly. Kong Deming regarded him with a calm expression. "It concerns you. Besides, this isn't a small matter." Kong Ming'an felt a cold premonition. As the current sole descendant of the Kong family, he knew some of its history. Long ago, the Kong family had ties to the Sun Moon Imperial family and had been prosperous. But because the head at the time chose the wrong side, the family was purged. Only his grandfather survived thanks to a personal favor with the former emperor. From then on, his grandfather had been the only remaining bloodline until Kong Ming'an was born. His parents raised him, but they both died in a spirit tool accident soon after he was born. An accident, not a plot. Since then, he had been the family's only heir, doted on and protected by his grandfather. He hesitated, then asked quietly, "Grandfather, you're not going to ask me to revive the Kong family bloodline, are you?" Kong Deming looked at him for a beat, then shook his head. "Not that." Relief washed over Kong Ming'an. "That's good." He reached for a glass of water and drank to steady himself. Then Kong Deming added, almost as an afterthought, "It's just that His Majesty intends to betroth a princess to you." Kong Ming'an, who rarely lost his composure, turned pale and pointed at himself in disbelief. "No, what?" Chapter 12, Ring Quenching Method. Nothing is more unbearable than suddenly being told you might have an extra fiancé. At least, that was how Kong Ming'an felt. After repeatedly confirming that his grandfather wasn't joking, he completely lost his composure. His thoughts scrambled. He rubbed his temples, a headache throbbing. "But I'm not even 7 yet," he protested. "Many people already have children in their teens. For you, it's only a few years, hardly too late." Kong Deming said calmly. Influenced by the memories of his previous life, Ming'an found the idea unacceptable. "Is it mandatory?" he asked again. Kong Deming looked at him and replied, "What do you think?" Ming'an fell silent. Of course, his grandfather wouldn't be displeased. The imperial betrothal probably wasn't just the Sun Moon Emperor's idea. His own family had likely tacitly agreed. He'd only just become a child again, and already a fiancé was being arranged. He couldn't help feeling absurd about it. Finally, he blurted out, "When did I say I wanted many?" Kong Deming blinked. "So you don't want that little girl from the mortal world family?" "She's an assistant I want to cultivate," Ming'an said quickly. Kong Deming paused, then narrowed his eyes and smiled with a touch of nostalgia. "Your father said the same thing back then." Ming'an was filled with question marks. So that's how preparations went. Everyone seemed to go through the same motions. After a long discussion, grandfather and grandson still didn't reach a firm decision about the princess betrothal. Ming'an didn't care much either way. His earlier upset had been more at the sheer absurdity of it. Something that had taken him more than 20 years in his previous life was being settled in less than 10 in this one. He could only shrug at the irony. Life soon returned to its usual rhythm. Days of arduous cultivation, soul engineer experiments, and probing the mysteries of spirit rings slipped by. In the blink of an eye, Kong Ming'an was 7.5. Deep within the Hall of Worship, in a highly specialized laboratory, the air was heavy and instruments monitoring energy blinked in dense patterns. White-robed technicians made final adjustments to their devices. In the center of the experimental field stood an officer with a solemn, meticulous expression. Wang Meng, the ambitious man Ming'an had met at the Soul Engineer Legion's reserve station. 6 spirit rings, yellow, yellow, purple, purple, black, black, revolved slowly beneath his feet, and his Spirit Emperor aura was unmistakable. Kong Ming'an stood a short distance behind him. His small frame looked tiny in the vast space, yet he carried an air of calm command. Beside him, Meng Hongqian wore a fitted white lab coat and held a clipboard. Her ice-blue eyes were fixed on the man in the center, her expression the steady focus of a capable assistant. After nearly a year of study and close mentorship, Hongqian had gradually taken on the demeanor of a researcher. Ming'an glanced up at his grandfather watching from the second-floor observation deck, then spoke clearly. "Begin." Wang Meng closed his eyes to settle himself, inhaled deeply, and then snapped them open. Without spirit possession or overt spirit abilities, he took a stance, and then, with a crisp, explosive sound, a yellow spirit ring beneath his feet detonated. Power flooded his body under precise control. He frowned briefly, then adapted. Without hesitation, he willed his mind and 3 more rings, yellow, purple, purple, to explode in succession. Bang! 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 Energy from the 4-ring explosions surged into Wang Meng, causing his body to swell visibly. Gritting his teeth, he stepped forward and unleashed a heavy punch. The sound rolled like thunder. He began running through the supporting combat techniques of the body tempering method, each punch, every extreme stretch and contraction of bone and muscle working like an invisible pump. The violent ring explosion energy was driven deeper, forced to scour, penetrate, and integrate into the inner layers of his body. Hot, searing streams of qi and blood mingled with wisps of escaping energy, pouring out from every pore. Wang Meng's eyes shone with the strain of trying to control the surge. With each successive blow, his bloated form gradually tightened, shrinking back like a deflating balloon as bones cracked and realigned. The process continued for nearly 15 minutes. When he finished, planting himself like an iron pillar, the violent fluctuations finally eased. The qi and blood were contained within his body, and his physique appeared denser. Every movement now carried a heavy, grounded weight. The experiment ended. Kong Ming'an looked over the strengthened life aura settled within Wang Meng. He felt no joy, only a trace of disappointment. "It failed again," he murmured. Nearly a year earlier, after he first mastered the ring explosion technique, Ming'an had begun researching a method to aid body cultivators by harnessing ring explosion. The idea was to use the vast spirit power released by a ring explosion to scour the body, letting the body's own adaptability harmonize with the body tempering method. Under that combined effect, the body could repeatedly push through its limits within a controlled range, overcoming the problem of reduced tempering efficiency once body refining reached the spirit ancestor stage. He had temporarily named this approach the ring quenching method. Half a year ago, during experiments to collect data for improving the ring quenching method, he had made his test subjects repeatedly break their physical limits using the technique. When pushed that far, qi and blood would naturally appear. Chapter 13. The Disadvantages of Twin Martial Souls. Qi and blood is a rather vague concept in the cognitive system of the Douluo continent. It is neither spirit power nor mental force, but a kind of life energy hidden deep in the flesh, muscles, and bones, intimately tied to life itself, to spirit power, and even to the origin of a spirit. It has no form and cannot be seen, yet it truly exists. Powerful spirit masters, like high-level beast spirit users, often possess qi and blood like a dragon, vast and vigorous, supporting their terrifying physique and explosive strength. The abundance of qi and blood directly affects the foundation of the body, recovery ability, and the depth of potential. In a sense, it can be considered one of the concrete manifestations of the origin of life. This ring tempering method experiment, besides collecting daily data for later refinement, had a secondary goal: to try to touch and guide qi and blood. Ming'an had theorized that the immense energy released by a ring explosion could act as a guide, activating and directing the subject's own qi and blood. If the body's qi and blood could actively absorb, transform, and fuse with that external force, rather than relying solely on the brute force endurance of the body tempering method movements, tempering efficiency would multiply, risks would shrink, and deeper transformations might be possible. Unfortunately, it failed. The soldier's will and the foundation laid by the body tempering method were strong enough that the ring explosion swept through his muscles, bones, and flesh, forcing repeated breakthroughs in his physique. But he still couldn't gain control over qi and blood. Ming'an, Kong Deming's steady voice sounded again. Experiment failures are common. Being able to use ring explosion as a daily cultivation method is already stepping into a territory nobody else has reached. Since this involves qi and blood, there's no need to be so impatient. Kong Ming'an only sighed softly and shook his head. With a calm look, he turned to Miss Meng, who held a clipboard. "Meng, collect the data." "Understood." Meng Hongqian nodded and promptly moved to the data terminal, gathering information according to standard procedure. With only grandfather and grandson left in the chamber, Kong Ming'an finally asked, "Grandpa, what level are you now?" 97, Kong Deming replied frankly. "Ever since I received your improved ring tempering method, I've been able to stably trigger ring explosions up to 8 spirit rings or less for body refinement. With the resources I've stockpiled, my physique still has room to improve. Once I polish it to its current limit, the remaining 5 spirit ring slots in my second spirit could be filled with at least 3 rings of 90,000 years or more. Breaking through to 98 should be no problem. 99, I don't know. 97. Kong Ming'an's heart stirred. He hadn't expected his elder to advance so quickly. If he remembered correctly, Deming had only broken through to 95 a little over half a year ago. 2 levels in half a year. Could that be the advantage of twin spirits? Yet Ming'an's brow did not relax. It tightened. Cultivating with twin spirits is an opportunity, but also a grave hidden danger. First, when both spirits cultivate at the same time, spirit power can rise too quickly. If the physique and mental force can't keep pace, loss of control and a catastrophic explosion can occur. More fatally, there is the issue of spirit compatibility. If the 2 spirits have conflicting attributes or clashing energy properties, forcing cultivation or simultaneous use is like burying 2 bombs inside the body that could detonate at any moment. His elder's twin spirits were a textbook example. The first, Silver Moon, was a rare mutation of the Moon Spirit, one of the Sun-Moon Empire Imperial family's 3 legacy spirits. But it abandoned much of the original Moon Spirit's nature and leaned toward the mental domain. The second spirit, Sun, was another legacy spirit of the Imperial family, pure Yang, rigid and supremely powerful, with energy akin to ultimate fire and ultimate light, devastating in direct combat. Silver Moon and Sun, one extreme Yin, the other extreme Yang, symbolic of the Sun-Moon Empire's emblem, perhaps even capable of sun and moon shining together. But in terms of actual energy properties and operational rules, they fundamentally and intensely conflicted, like ice and fire. Even cultivating only the Silver Moon would produce friction. That his elder, while managing state affairs and conducting experiments, could reach level 94, cultivating mostly Silver Moon, was astonishing. With Ming'an's current knowledge, the only known way to perfectly resolve such twin spirit conflicts was through divinity trials. Whether it was Bibidong 10,000 years ago or Tang San, twin spirit cultivators who truly harmonized their opposing spirits ultimately relied on the power of a divinity legacy. But divinity trials are ethereal and rare, an opportunity one cannot chase. Ming'an could not depend on such a slim chance. Only one path remained, an ultimate physique, a body strong enough to bear, suppress, or even forcibly harmonize 2 conflicting forces. His initial decision to take Body Cultivator as an entry point had considered that lowest research threshold. At the same time, an urgent motive drove him to find a way for his elder to resolve the twin spirit conflict. He still needed a lot of time to grow. Before that, finding a powerful Tao protector for himself was only natural, and his elder, someone he could absolutely trust, was the best choice. The stronger his grandfather's strength, the more secure Ming'an would be. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urgency. He had to speed up his cultivation, acquire his first spirit ring, then use ring explosion to guide his chi and blood. Once chi and blood manifested clearly within his body, he could directly perceive, research, guide, and control it. Chi and blood were still a form of energy. If he could personally master it and integrate that understanding into the body cultivator system, his elder might have a chance to raise his strength to limit Douluo. Then he could act without restraint. Body cultivator remained too limited. It couldn't produce anything flashy on its own, Ming'an thought, but he found himself glancing at his elder. Because the Sun Moon Emperor intended to make Shu Tianran crown prince, Kong Deming had recently been given more experimental responsibility and had started delegating many affairs. Aside from crucial imperial matters and Hall of Worship business he still controlled, most of his energy had shifted to his natal spirit tool, the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield. In the original records, his elder had completely integrated his spirit and natal spirit tool, becoming the first level 10 soul engineer in Douluo history. Even with spirit power only at level 95, he could exert strength comparable to a limit Douluo. Now he was already level 97, and 98 seemed within reach. If the research into fusing his natal spirit tool with his spirit succeeded, unless a certain shameless divinity interfered, he would have nothing to worry about. Chapter 14. The Big Hand from the Plane of Will. It was already afternoon when he returned to the Kong residence with Miss Meng. After handing over the organized materials, Miss Meng decided to begin her daily cultivation. The longer she stayed by his side, the more she realized her own talent was limited. If she wanted to remain always beside him, she would have to work harder. Watching Meng Hongchen's energetic back turn the corner of the corridor, Kong Ming'an's faint smile slowly faded. He turned and walked back into his laboratory. With a soft ding, the identity verification accepted him. The heavy alloy door slid open and closed silently behind him. The lab was just as it always was, brilliantly lit, the air heavy with a metallic chill that sharpened the senses. He took his place and drew a crystal box from his Soul Tool storage ring. The box had been specially made of high-strength insulating crystal and set within a Soul Tool array. It could seal most special materials and slow their degradation. Inside the crystal box lay a carving knife. It had an archaic design, its body a dark, chilling green. The blade was narrow and long, its edge shining with a cold, eerie light. The hilt was wrapped in twisted dark gold patterns that emitted subtle, negative auras, coldness, malice, greed, as if countless wailing souls were trapped inside. This was unmistakably the soul-devouring carving knife. In the original story, Huo Yuhao would have obtained this knife years later at an auction in Star Luo City. But here, the knife belonged to him. Soon after his past life memories returned, he'd used his authority to send people hunting down the opportunities described in the original work. The soul-devouring carving knife was one of those. Persistence paid off. Over half a year ago, his agents had bought it for a mere 400,000 gold coins from the descendant of a ruined noble family, one destroyed by the knife's backlash. For an artifact whose origin was the gold of life, that price bordered on theft. Kong Ming'an didn't take it out at once. He closed his eyes and centered himself, gradually bringing his mental state to a peak. Half a year. A full half year. From the day he acquired the soul-devouring carving knife, the purification work had never stopped. Though he had no Iliex with him, his absolute control over his own mental force let him resist the knife's resentment and curses. Using that advantage, he painstakingly peeled away the maledictions bit by bit. It was slow and inefficient, but effective. The steady stripping of hatred and rancor had the side benefit of tempering his own mental force. The ritual became both cleansing and training. It had become his daily routine. He extended his hands. Threads of silver-glowing mental force streamed from his fingertips and wrapped the knife inside the crystal box, binding the curse threads that coiled like venomous snakes. The silver strands moved with surgical precision, pulling at the foul knots of resentment and slicing them away. Each peel and shred sent the knife shuddering. Each act provoked 1,000 anguished screams from trapped souls. Kong Ming'an, accustomed to the sound, simply felt his mental force strengthen and refine under the onslaught, as if it were being forged by the piercing cries. Time passed slowly. This session lasted longer than any before, because today was the final push. His fingertips remained steady. The silver threads worked like a scalpel, shaving the last attachments from the blade, drawing away the dense, dark red mass of curse origin that had nested at its core. The mass resisted with a roar that tore at the edges of his mental sea, trying to twist and subvert his will. He ignored it. The silver glow tightened. Pure mental fire flared into being. Like a red-hot iron plunged into ice water, the struggling curse origin was incinerated by the extraordinarily pure mental flame. It howled one last time, and then, with accelerating violent tremors, melted and vaporized into nothing. As the final wisp of defilement dispersed, the soul-devouring carving knife in the crystal box underwent a dramatic transformation. The dark green washed away as if shedding centuries of grime, revealing brilliance beneath. The blade turned translucent as fine jade, gleaming with a cool emerald light. A vast, utterly pure life aura, gold of life, swept through the laboratory, filling the room in an instant. Gold of life, Kong Ming'an breathed, staring unblinkingly at the knife now showing its true form. Relief and a rare flicker of joy passed across his face. Half a year of work had finally borne fruit. A knife forged from the gold of life would be invaluable to his research into life energy and the mysteries of chi and blood. He reached out without hesitation to feel it with his own fingertip. The moment his skin touched the gold of life, something unexpected happened. A faint, crisp rip sounded in the air less than 3 feet in front of him, like paper tearing. A hair-thin spatial rift opened, black and deep enough to seem to swallow light. From the wound in space drifted a gray cluster of light, so weak it seemed on the verge of snuffing out, wavering like a dying candle. Kong Ming'an frowned. The light cluster fluttered, its aura fragile as dust, yet the mental fluctuations it gave off were ancient and pure, steeped in vicissitude and wisdom. His instincts prickled with caution. The cluster seemed to sense him too. It turned slowly toward the gold of life in his hand, and the next moment a voice, old and weary, sounded directly in his mental sea. Such pure and vast life origin. Gold of life? Ha ha! I never thought that this wisp of my remnant soul, on the verge of dissipating at any moment, would still have a chance to live. The voice quivered with exhaustion. After a beat, the gray light flickered, and a clearer thought slipped into his mind. Kid, would you like to make a deal with this old man? Chapter 15. Tang-san, there really is a way to die. God Realm, Sea God's Mansion. Boom! A violent tremor ran through the Sea God's Mansion. A pressure far beyond an ordinary first-rank divinity rolled outward, stirring illusory waves of sea around the estate. Third brother, the woman with rabbit ears on her head called, looking at the blue-haired man beside her with worry etched on her face. I'm fine, Tang-san said in a low voice. He shook his head, and a smile touched his lips. Don't worry, Xiao Wu. I just saw something. Interesting. Oh. Xiao Wu relaxed a little. She had always trusted her husband completely. Tang-san looked composed, his gaze fixed on the projection of the Douluo plane floating before him, but a shadow passed through his eyes. His grand plan, meticulously crafted with 10,000 years of cunning, had just encountered an unexpected variable. He had only for a moment taken his attention off the Douluo plane, and the soul-devouring carving knife, originally prepared for the Son of Luck, had fallen into the hands of an unknown being who had appeared out of nowhere. Worse, the plain will of the Douluo plane had inexplicably bestowed a high-level remnant soul upon that person. Even more intolerable, it had taken half of the enormous luck he had spent 10,000 years accumulating to nurture the Son of Luck and given it to this stranger, creating a second Son of Luck. A cold edge crept into Tang-san's expression. This loss of control gnawed at him. He truly had a Tao of courting death. Gritting his teeth, he separated a wisp of divine thought. Since an unknown variable had appeared, it must be dealt with. Whoever it was could not be allowed to ruin his 10,000-year plan. He intended to slip the divine thought past the Douluo plane's barrier and enter the lower realm through the back door he had planted long ago. Before he could, a massive roar tore through the air. Boom! Dark purple divine force of destruction shredded Tongsan's divine thought as it attempted to descend, and even ran along the link between his divine thought and his main body, as if trying to suppress him directly. Destruction! Tangsan exploded. His body blurred, and he appeared above the mansion in an instant, the sea god trident forming in his hand. He paused in midair and forced the surrounding destructive divine force aside. The clash between two members of the God Realm Committee quickly turned the normally quiet God Realm into a spectacle. Divinities emerged from the shadows, mostly to watch with interest. Feeling all those eyes, Tongsan's expression tightened as he stared at the dark purple figure at a distance. Blue-gold light flared around him, and the sea god's divine force pulsed out with a strangely sacred aura. Destruction, what are you trying to do? Tongsan's voice carried a threat. He had little patience for the god of destruction, who so often opposed him. The god of destruction regarded Tangsan with calm, unmoved eyes. He ignored the provocation and spoke with solemn authority. Divinities are not permitted to interfere in the lower realm, sea god. You know that, especially when it involves attempting to kill a son of luck. Do you want to see a plane self-destruct? His aura rose, and the light around Tangsan wavered and trembled. Gritting his teeth, Tangsan shot back. The Douluo plane falls under my jurisdiction. What happens there is my business, not yours. Jurisdiction? The god of destruction replied coldly. Interfering with the lower realm and trying to kill a son of luck are enough for me to call a God Realm Committee meeting and put your jurisdiction to a vote. Tangsan had no answer. He calmed himself quickly. I haven't interfered yet. Consider this a warning. The god of destruction's tone did not change. This is your first offense. I'll let it slide this time, but if you cross the line again, we'll meet at the committee. With that, he ceased moderating his pressure. Dark purple divine force plunged down and easily overwhelmed Tangsan's blue-gold light. Bang! Tangsan's body shook, and he was forced back several paces. He gripped the trident, propped himself with a pillar of divine force, and finally steadied in the air, discarding the lingering destructive energy. When he looked up again, the god of destruction had already vanished. He hovered there, expression unreadable. Third brother, Xiao Wu, flew out from the mansion, concern heavy in her voice. I'm fine, Xiao Wu. Tangsan shook his head, then returned to the mansion with her. He had been reckless and drawn destruction's attention. If he could truly control the Asura god position completely, why would destruction be able to push back at him like that? And that Douluo plane will, how dare it go against his arrangements, lopping off luck and nurturing another son of luck? It really had a death-wishing Tao. No, his 10,000-year plan could not be derailed. He had to find a way. Facing Xiao Wu's anxious gaze, he changed the subject. By the way, Xiao Wu, what did you want to ask me earlier? Xiao Wu hesitated, still worried, but seeing Tangsan's composed face, she held back further questions and said the thing she'd meant to ask. I wanted to know where Xiaoqi has been these past few days. I haven't seen her. Xiaoqi, Tangsan paused. Then a flash of remarkable cunning lit his eyes. Of course, Xiaoqi. A plan framework snapped together in his mind. He answered quickly, Don't worry, Xiao Wu. I sent Xiaoqi to the lower realm to train. She went to train? Xiao Wu blinked. Yes, Da Ming and Ming are watching over her, and my divine thought will be keeping an eye on her. Xiaoqi will be fine. As he spoke, Tangsan calmed himself and reached out to the wisps of divine thought he had sent to the lower realm long ago. A moment later, his eyes steadied. The Douluo plane had been alerted by his abortive attempt to interfere. If he tried again openly, he would be detected for certain. But the divine thought he had already embedded in the lower realm remained undisturbed. A mere son of luck. Could he really cause such a commotion? Tangsan snorted inwardly. He already had a plan. Meanwhile, in the god of destruction's mansion, the god of destruction materialized and took his divine throne. Using his authority as enforcer of the god realm, he summoned the projection of the Douluo plane before him and studied it. Suddenly, a gentle voice sounded in his ear. Is this the plane that the sea god governs? Chapter 16. Destruction. Damn it, my throne has moved. The god of destruction's gaze was calm. He held the goddess of life's hand. She had appeared beside him without his noticing, and said in a tranquil tone, this is the Douluo plane. He looked down at the plane, and his eyes fixed on 3 conspicuous luck clusters. He had noticed Tong San's sudden actions only because this Douluo plane was far too conspicuous. For an ordinary plane will, fostering a single sun of luck, already pushed it near its limit. Before today, the Douluo plane already had 2 suns of luck. One was the imperial auspicious beast, the 3-eyed golden lion, hidden in the Stardew Great Forest. It held roughly 20% of the plane's luck, and its influence was confined to the forest, belonging to the spirit beast line. The other was a young descendant of the same clan as that Tier 2 divinity, the god of war. Still nascent, but it carried 80% of the Douluo plane's luck accumulated over 10,000 years. The luck there was dense enough to be tangible. Barring accidents, that was someone with the potential to form a god position, just like the 2 extraordinary Tier 1 divinities who had ascended from the Douluo plane in the past, the first sea god and the first angel god. He had thought Tong San lucky. His plane produced many talents, and soon he would likely acquire several subordinate divinities with great future potential. If the Douluo plane continued to yield talents, they would probably align under Tong San, complicating the god realm's expansion plans. But now something felt off. The plane will, when perceiving a divinity born of itself, usually reacted with a natural fondness, like a mother seeing her successful child. That was why the god realm had the rule: divinities have jurisdiction over the plane from which they ascended. What he was seeing now did not fit that pattern. After Tang San's divine thought was detected by the plane will had reacted with shock, like an ungrateful son returning home to steal money and getting caught by a mother with a broom. This was no ordinary bond between a plane and its child. The plane will actively splitting luck to create another son of luck was illogical, and Tang San trying to directly interfere with the lower realm to strike at that twangs. Son of luck was even more baffling. Something about Tang San's behavior was scheming and harmful to the Douluo plane. The god of destruction frowned and mulled over a few possibilities. Could Tang San be treating the Douluo plane like a vegetable garden to harvest luck? Harvesting luck from the lower realm was absolutely forbidden by god realm law. If true, that single act would justify sanction by the god realm's central authority. He hesitated, then sent his divine perception deeper into the Douluo plane. The plane's projection before him enlarged, resolving into the image of someone sitting in a laboratory. Life recordings appeared beside the image, system shaping, spirit ring conception, and also some special fate shielding, making memory scrying impossible. The god of destruction murmured, eyes sharpening. This was talent. Compared to the other son of luck that held 80% of the plane's 10,000-year luck, this child had full potential to become an independent divinity. The first reaction upon discovering such a talent was not recruitment. It was to move immediately to control, bully, or kill. He thought of an old rival, and an expression of displeasure flashed across his face. Still, he extended his hand and anchored a measure of his divine force onto the young talent. A likely future divinity deserved an early investment. And if Tang San persisted in attacking, this could serve as leverage and a pretext to act against him. Xiaozi, the goddess of life, said, her voice threaded with uncertainty. The god of destruction withdrew his attention and looked at her. What is it, Xiaolu? My god position tells me. The goddess of life frowned and pointed at a projection between them with astonishment. It has found a successor who meets the standards. The god of destruction froze. He remembered the inheritance requirement she'd set. The successor must surpass her in life control. He followed the direction of her finger, peering into the projection. Then a clear message slid into his consciousness from his own god position. God position successor found. The god of destruction was speechless. No way. His god position had also shifted. He fell into a stunned silence. Sun Moon Empire, Mingdu, Kong family mansion. In Kong Ming'an's spiritual sea, he sat motionless, staring at the pale, human-shaped figure before him. He felt set up. He had just finished purifying the soul-devouring carving knife when a spatial rift opened, and the remnant soul of Ilyax drifted out and struck a bargain with him. There was no plausible way it was mere coincidence. Looking at Ilyax, who was overseeing the fusion process of the gold of living beings with his body, Kong Ming'an considered his own situation. Undeniably, he had been noticed by high-level existences. Most likely, Tang San, the pure and noble god king, had marked him. By Tang San's logic, Kong Ming'an was an unexpected element disrupting a 10,000-year plan and should be eliminated to avoid future trouble. From that perspective, Ilyax's appearance could not have been Tang San's doing. Tang San would not give an opportunity to someone he intended to eradicate. Therefore, it had to be other powers. Kong Ming'an's thoughts quickly converged on one answer: the plain will. Only the plain will could have engineered so many coincidences to send Ilyax to him. Tang San, brilliant as he was, could not have pulled that off alone. If the plain will had intervened, that meant he had been bet on. If the plain will had blocked a strike for him, or if someone in the god realm had acted to stop Tang San, then he might yet be safe. "Have I become a chess piece in their struggle?" he murmured. There was no fear in his eyes, only a light that had grown a few shades brighter. For now, it seemed he was still fine. Chapter 17, Trading 2.0. The emerald green life force spread through Kong Ming'an's mental force sea like ink blotting into paper, blooming in clusters. What had been a flat, quiet expanse of consciousness slowly transformed under the influx of this pure, abundant vitality into a real, tangible inner space. The volume of my mental force sea has increased at least fourfold, and it's still rising. My mental force has improved, and it even seems to have gained some undying properties. Kong Ming'an's projections silently tested and cataloged the changes. My physical qualities, when manifested outwardly, have improved too. My physique has reached at least spirit ancestor level. I might not be far from withstanding a 10,000-year spirit ring. A faint smile of satisfaction appeared in his projection's eyes. The improvement was greater than he'd expected. The months of careful purification hadn't been wasted. He calmed his thoughts, rose, and bowed slightly to the small gray remnant soul hovering nearby. "Thank you, old Ilyax." Ilyax shook his head. "It's only my duty. The pure life gold alone couldn't sustain this wisp of my remnant soul. If it weren't for you, I likely would have dissipated long ago." Kong Ming'an waved off the gratitude. Their relationship was one of mutual benefit. "What are your plans next, old Ilyax?" he asked, curious. "You don't need to pry," Ilyax replied, but there was a hint of interest in his voice. He looked at Kong Ming'an, eyes narrowing as if testing him. "You know me, don't you?" Kong Ming'an paused. Had he been that obvious? He shrugged and spread his hands casually. "I do. I know of your deeds. Still, this is my first time meeting you." "I see." Ilyax accepted that and didn't press further. As a remnant soul, his memories were thin. Dwelling on them was pointless. For now, he could confirm that the young man before him bore no malice and even showed goodwill. From Kong Ming'an's actions earlier, however, Ilyax had deduced more. He raised his eyes and said quietly, "Child, would you be willing to make another deal with me?" Kong Ming'an was taken aback for a moment, but the seriousness in Ilyax's tone told him enough. He smiled and nodded. "My pleasure." When two clever people negotiate, things move quickly. Each understood the other's needs and the leverage to offer. Ilyax, in exchange for the life-sustaining support he'd receive while recuperating in the Eye of Life, generously shared knowledge, necromancy, light magic, and derivative techniques for using soul power and mental force. For Kong Ming'an, the knowledge itself was invaluable, but even more precious was Ilyax as a person, a rare research talent who had once overturned the entire world of Godly Throne of Seal. Compared with Kong Ming'an, who had awakened memories of a previous life and held the uniquely advantageous energy spirit, Ilyax brought a completely different scientific perspective and a power system unlike anything in the Douluo world. Many practitioners on the Douluo plane, even Kong Ming'an's assistant Miss Meng, were limited by the common doctrines they'd been taught since childhood. He and Ilyax were less likely to be constrained by the traditional spirit master system. Simply learning from Ilyax wouldn't be enough. Bringing Ilyax into his own research, working together, was the true prize. But this required time to build trust. For now, a peaceful cooperative relationship would suffice. After Ilyax condensed back into a small gray cluster and retreated into the Eye of Life, Kong Ming'an's consciousness returned from his mental force C to his body. He opened his eyes and reflexively clenched his right hand, then slowly relaxed it. The surge in his physical strength felt unreal. He'd need time to adapt, but it wouldn't be hard. More importantly, a fresh, pure emerald glow rose from his palm, the life force. It flowed from within him, a continuous, nourishing stream of the highest purity. After fusing with the life gold, this life energy now naturally ran through his body, strengthening his physical form and mental force. In the original story, when Huo Yuhao fused with the life gold and obtained the Eye of Life, his mental force C expanded and his body strengthened for the same reason, the nourishment of life force. But after Kong Ming'an's fusion, he had direct control over the life force moving inside him. Energy, he thought. Life force is also a type of energy. My conjecture was right. He lifted his hand and watched as three distinct energies manifested in his palm: spirit power, mental force, and life force. Kong Ming'an's expression was calm, thoughtful. If life force counted as a manipulable type of energy, then his earlier theory held the varieties of energy his energy spirit could control depended on the kinds of energy he himself possessed. With spirit power, mental force, and now life force under his command, control over chi and blood would be within reach. The basic framework of a body cultivator could be established. A new question arose: which spirit ring should he aim for? He was 7.5 years old, with a spirit power rank of 7. With enhancement pills like the Xuan water pill to raise innate spirit power, and the additional modification from the life gold, barring accidents, he should reach spirit power rank 10 within a year, and then absorb his first spirit ring. But was a spirit ring solely the power of the spirit master? If so, could he control the ring's elemental attribute? If he could command an attribute like fire after absorbing a fire attribute spirit ring, then his choice of spirit beast would be decisive. Ideally, he would seek a multi-attribute spirit beast, something like the Silver Moon Wolf King with water, fire, earth, wind, light, darkness, and lightning elements, or a rare beast with special attributes such as space, time, gravity, or annihilation. Fortunately, he had time to consider his options. Chapter 18, Tang San's Order. While someone was still planning his future, on the other side of the world, the Clear Sky sect hovered within the clouds. Outside the sect master's pavilion, in a small gazebo, two figures idly played chess and chatted. Not long after they began, the more burly one broke the silence. "Damn, big brother, can we not drink tea? This stuff has no taste." The burly man looked plaintive. The middle-aged man in a sky-blue robe opposite him set down his teacup without a word. He raised his eyes slightly, glanced at the other, and said calmly, "When your mind is clear, then I'll let you drink alcohol." "My mind is already clear," the burly man protested. "Clear enough to give little donger alcohol?" The burly man's face went awkward. In a low voice, he defended himself. "I was being kind. The monkey wine I buried thousands of years ago. I thought its medicinal properties might strengthen little donger's constitution. And she slept for months and didn't wake up? She's not even 6. How many times have I told you not to use spirit beast methods on little donger?" The sky-blue robed man snapped. The burly man had no retort. Just as the sky-blue man was about to continue, both of them suddenly stiffened. Their relaxed expressions hardened. Without hesitation, the two figures flashed and returned to a secret room inside the sect master's pavilion. The moment they entered, both touched their foreheads at the same time. Two streams of blue-gold light shot from their brows and landed before them, condensing slowly into a blue figure. "Tang San." He smiled gently and looked at them. "Daming, Ming, long time no see." Daming paused, then dropped to one knee. "See God, Your Excellency." Ming reacted and knelt beside him. "Why so formal with me?" Tang San said with a helpless smile, but did not tell them to rise. Without delay, he continued, "I need you two to do something for me." "Please command, Sea God," Daming said, head bowed. Tang San's eyes showed the smallest hint of satisfaction as he spoke slowly. "I want you to kill someone for me." A moment later, the two were back in the gazebo. They resumed their seats, but the easy atmosphere was gone, replaced by heaviness. After a long pause, Ming could not keep his curiosity in check. "Big brother, about this. What do you think?" "I'm going to lie down and think," Daming answered. "Not going to kill him?" No rush. Deming's eyes were calm. Although I don't know the full situation, for now there's no need to hurry. He tapped his head. Since he withdrew his divine thought from our sea of consciousness, it shows he doesn't want others to know he ordered us to do the killing. And the only beings he fears enough to hide from are other divinities. If we act now, success or failure, we risk. Deming trailed off, the implication clear. Then, are we just going to let him die? Erming's face was indignant, unwilling. What are you worrying about? Deming shot back. Let's stall. That man is afraid of being seen as the one who ordered it, so he removed the restrictions in our sea of consciousness. The divine thought in our minds has been withdrawn and self-sealed in the secret room. For the time being, at least he can't touch us. 1 day in the God realm equals 1 year in Douluo. Let's stall for a few years. That guy is too scrupulous. He wouldn't personally get his hands dirty. He thinks it's beneath him. Erming gave a self-deprecating laugh, but nodded. You're right. Send someone to the Sun Moon Empire to investigate, just to show we're doing something. But if he doesn't push us, leave it be for now. Understood. Erming bowed and left to pass along the order. Daming remained alone in the gazebo, sipping tea but staring off toward the Sun Moon Empire. A few days later, in the Sun Moon Empire at the Kong family mansion, the training ground echoed with the sound of blows striking empty air. Boom, boom, boom. Xiao Hongchen, who had doubled his usual training sessions, watched a figure pounding at the air with a twitching expression and nudged his younger sister. Did you drug him? Miss Meng looked at her brother with a look of exasperation and shook her head. Haven't had a chance yet. Then why's he been so crazy the last few days? Xiao Hongchen's voice rose. 4 continuous hours of extreme, over-the-limit, body-tempering training. This was beyond overtraining. It was self-destruction. If it were him, he'd already be in the infirmary. How could this guy act like nothing was wrong? Who knows? Maybe it's Ming'an's latest breakthrough, Miss Meng replied casually. Ming'an was capable of sudden, astonishing leaps forward. She was used to it. For her, this was nothing. Her ice-blue eyes, though, were fixed on the shirtless man training, not far away. Ming'an's physique was impressive. She wondered what it would feel like to touch, possibly very nice. Narrowing her eyes, she relaxed into a quieter posture and watched. Time passed. Eventually, Ming'an slowly drew back his fists and closed his eyes to calm his body. At the same time, a presence visible only to him lingered, a phantom that watched with interest and commented. Using spirit power as a foundation, simulating a special spirit ability to stimulate acupoints throughout the body to achieve the effect of body tempering, it observed. Somewhat like the cultivation techniques practiced by knights, but with significant differences. It's merely the difference in foundational systems. Compared to the framework I designed, the current body temperer is still crude. Kong Ming'an shook his head silently. Faced with the possible threat of a certain god king, he felt the current results were insufficient. Calmly, he told the Phantom, the knight system doesn't fit the Douluo world, but the blood refinement golden body you suggested is worth studying. The Phantom, Iliax, grew interested. Over the past few days, he'd been observing Ming'an's experiments, and those experiments convinced him this young man was a kindred spirit, someone driven to explore the unknown. Iliax had once thought of taking Ming'an as a disciple. Now he treated him like a fellow traveler. Are you planning to replace demonic beast blood with spirit beast essence? Iliax asked. No. Ming'an shook his head, voice tinged with anticipation. Actually, it can be more direct. For instance, replace demonic god blood with pure Qian blood to create a Qian blood forging golden body. Iliax grew even more intrigued. These experiments, this direction, might yield something entirely new. Chapter 19. He proposed the Qian blood forging golden body method. Did he want to start researching it right away? Of course not. He had a plan. He knew what to do and when to do it. Though the Qi and blood forging golden body technique was important, for him it was just a new project folder with a flashy name. He had a notion, but no framework. Short term, it wouldn't benefit him and might even slow him down. So why propose it? To pique Iliax's curiosity. As fellow researchers, Kong Ming'an didn't think Iliax would ignore it. Sure enough, after he explained the idea, Iliax paused, amusement flickering in his eyes. System collision and fusion? Not bad. After a moment's thought, Iliax shook his head. Unfortunately, I haven't researched the Knight system much. My focus is magic and soul. I can't offer you much help right now. It's all right. Kong Ming'an smiled and mentally transmitted a file titled Self-Conceived Spirit Ring to Iliax. Elder Iliax, what do you think of this? Iliax glanced at it and his eyes brightened. This was interesting. In only a few looks, his interest was caught. He read a while longer, then looked back at Kong Ming'an with a teasing expression. You little rascal, trying to get me to do all the hard work for you? Cough, you are the soul expert. Besides, isn't this also related to your revival? Don't you think the spirit ring is highly malleable? Iliax's gaze drifted to the section on spirit ring materialization. He chuckled and scolded him affectionately. You rascal. Then he sighed and nodded. All right, I'll take this on. Thank you, Elder Iliax. No need to be polite. From your description, it's mutually beneficial. He smiled, dissolved into a stream of gray light, and returned to the life eye between his brows. Kong Ming'an let out a small sigh of relief. With Iliax handling the spirit ring research, he could focus on cultivation, body tempering. Time began to pass according to plan. Spring turned to autumn, days slipping by like sand. When he looked up, a year and a half had gone by. Kong Ming'an was now 9, his spirit power rank had reached 10, and his physique matched that of an ordinary spirit king. In that same year, the Sun Moon Empire quietly formed 3 special Soul Engineer battle groups. Sun Moon troops began to harass Star Luo border forces in small raids. The border bristled with the signs of impending war. The Clear Sky Sect's Great Sect Master and Second Sect Master both announced their seclusions, handing sect affairs to the elders and confirming the young sect master's right of succession. And in the commercial markets of the 3 Douluo empires, a trading association called Ming'an began to rise, gradually monopolizing the spirit tool market. Damn it! Why are you so tough, you guy? Xiao Hongqian, who had obtained his second spirit ring, a 1,000-year ring, some time ago, balled his fist and looked at a certain person with a face that screamed existential doubt. Kong Ming'an considered the question, and the corners of his mouth tipped up. Perhaps my physique is rather special. Several years had passed, and the once slightly immature boy had grown. He still had room to develop, but his frame was no longer as skinny as before. A simple white lab coat couldn't hide the gentle, bamboo-like bearing he gave off. His features were delicate, his eyes warm with a casual, knowing light, and a faint smile curled at his lips. He had the kind of gaze that measured everything, and a fledgling, roguish charm that suggested he was just beginning to learn how to use it. Of course, that description only applied in the eyes of the opposite sex. To Xiao Hongqian, he remained a complete scoundrel, a pig trying to steal the family's prized cabbage and entirely punchable. Xiao couldn't hold back any longer. So special you can challenge a spirit king one-on-one? Do you think I'm stupid? This guy definitely cheated. Who knows? Kong Ming'an smiled and spread his hands. He'd celebrated his 9th birthday a little over a month ago. He'd been cultivating the body tempering method for 2 years and 8 months. How could someone have the physique of a spirit king so quickly? The simple answer, he cheated. When the body tempering method was first created, the average cultivation efficiency of other practitioners was only 1/5 of his. That wasn't because he hoarded secrets. It was because nobody else could manipulate their spirit power with the same precision he could, not even those titled Douluo. If his 2 years and 8 months of training were converted to someone of average aptitude, it would take at least 13 to 14 years. His rapid ascent also depended on his near-infinite resources and the terrifying regenerative power provided by the gold of life. If one relied solely on the body tempering method without later using the ring tempering method, reaching Spirit King physique would reasonably take at least 20 years. His path was just wildly unreasonable. Your progress isn't slow either, Kong Ming'an said. Your second spirit ring is a 1,300-year one. At this rate, you could try for a 6,000-year ring for your third. Xiao Hongqian, a genius who could become a spirit king at 15 in the original timeline, perked up. If the third could be 6,000 years, maybe a 10,000-year ring wouldn't be impossible for the fourth. Before he could ask, a silver-white figure drifted over, and looped an arm through Kong Ming'an's. "What are you two talking about?" Miss Meng, grown into a graceful young woman, blinked her ice-blue eyes in curiosity. "Nothing, just looking at Xiao's body report. How about yours? Is your report out? How are the numbers?" "Average, I guess. It's just that you've made so many delicious things recently, Ming'an. I've put on a bit of weight." "Have you? Then try carrying me. That's not necessary." Xiao Hongchen watched his family's prized cabbage being curted by the pig and fumed inwardly. "No, you two. Stop treating me like air." He was furious. Chapter 20, Thorn Dragon. "You guys are pushing it," Xiao Hongchen protested. "Tsk." Meng Hongchen clicked her tongue softly, displeased, but she didn't press her teasing any further. She loosened her arms from around Kong Ming'an and stood at his side, smiling brightly as she asked, "By the way, Ming'an, you still haven't chosen your first spirit ring? It's been over a month." "No rush. I'll wait until Grandfather Kong returns," Kong Ming'an said casually. His grandfather had taken the matter of his first spirit ring very seriously. Having just come out of seclusion, while most people thought he was still secluded, Grandfather Kong had gone out himself to find a spirit beast for him. A 98th ranked, twin-spirited, proficient in ring explosion, and nearly a 10th ranked soul engineer going out to secure a spirit beast for him. This kind of assurance was unmistakable. As expected, Grandfather Kong was the most reliable. Kong Ming'an changed the subject from his spirit ring to chat with the Hongchen siblings about the ring tempering method. Both of them had recently broken through to the 2-ring level, and their bodies had advanced to the Spirit Elder stage. They now had the foundation to begin cultivating the ring tempering method. Kong Ming'an, having no intention of hiding anything, explained the precautions and details of the method to them. Just as he was speaking, the heavy alloy door of the laboratory slid open. Kong Ming'an was the first to notice and looked up. Kong Deming stood in the doorway, wearing a long robe and looking a little travel-worn. "Grandfather Kong?" Kong Ming'an was slightly surprised. He hadn't expected him back so soon. "Elder Kong," Xiao Hongchen greeted respectfully. "Grandfather Kong, you're back," Meng Hongchen said, more intimate in her tone than her brother's. Kong Deming nodded. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright. Calmly, he walked to the center of the laboratory and took a cylindrical container from his portable spirit tool. It was roughly half a person tall, made of silver-white metal, its surface etched with countless sealing runes. "Is this a beast sealing platform?" Kong Ming'an asked tentatively. Kong Deming gave a slight nod. The beast sealing platform, as its name suggested, was used to seal spirit beasts. It was an 8th-ranked spirit tool. Its advanced form was the god sealing platform that sealed the Snow Empress. Kong Deming set the silver-white cylinder on the special platform in the center of the lab and raised a hand. The surrounding spirit tool arrays activated and formed multiple energy containment fields. Meng Hongchen stepped forward, drawn by the powerful sealing energy radiating from the pillar, and whispered, "Grandfather Kong, what kind of spirit beast is sealed inside?" Kong Deming's eyes swept the platform, and he answered calmly with 3 words, "Thorny Dragon." Kong Ming'an's usually steady gaze flickered. He let out a quiet breath of relief. Thorny dragons were an exceedingly rare sub-dragon spirit beast with spatial attributes. Born with the power to manipulate space, they combined bizarre attacks and blistering speed with short-range teleportation. Their barbed tails could tear at space itself, and their potential was vast. At great age, a thorny dragon could even open its own spatial battlefield and command a thorny dragon domain. Among spatial beasts, they were top tier, exactly what he had hoped for in a first spirit ring. He had planned carefully. Ideally, he wanted a spirit beast with a high-tier attribute. Time, space, or fate were the best choices, followed by other ultimate attributes, such as ultimate ice beasts like the Ice Jade Scorpion. If possible, a silver heroic beast would do. Failing all that, his backup was to go to the Jingyang mountain range and capture a Silver Moon Wolf King with 7 elemental attributes. He had even considered hunting a mutated Evil Eye Tyrant in the depths of the Evil Demon Forest for its spatial or temporal traits, but that territory belonged to Yeshi Shui and harbored an evil emperor. The risk to Grandfather Kong was too great, so he gave that up. This time, things had gone even better than he had hoped. Grandfather Kong had returned bearing an exceptionally rare spatial spirit beast, the thorny dragon. It was a pleasant surprise. Research was progressing, cultivation was going well, and now there was a promising spirit beast. Things had been going smoothly lately, and his luck felt real. Watching his grandson's excited expression, Kong Deming's tone turned unusually solemn. Ming'an, although this thorny dragon has only just reached 10,000 years, and I happened to catch it while it was weak, if it produces a spirit ring, the energy contained within it will far exceed that of an ordinary 10,000-year spirit ring. Are you absolutely sure? Kong Ming'an asked. Even though his grandfather had seen him perform miracles many times and knew his physique and talents surpassed his peers, the idea of a 10th-ranked spirit master absorbing a 10,000-year spirit ring still sounded fantastical. If his grandfather didn't know his temperament, he never would have gone to find such a ring for him. Kong Ming'an met his grandfather's worried gaze and relaxed into a confident smile. Don't worry, Grandfather Kong. I can't promise 10 out of 10, but 9 out of 10 is probably accurate. Absorbing a 10,000-year spirit ring wasn't just a matter of withstanding the immense energy impact. There was an invisible, more dangerous hurdle: soul shock. 10,000-year spirit beasts had considerable soul power, and the resentment and soul remnants left in their spirit rings at death could batter the absorber's mental sea, at best causing mental injury, and at worst leaving them a fool. Normally, a spirit master's mind and soul power could only resist such shock once they reached the Spirit King stage. For Kong Ming'an, though, this was the least of his worries. The solution was straightforward: purify and eradicate the spirit beast's soul remnants lingering on the spirit ring. Without the beast's soul, there would be no shock. Elder Yi, Kong Ming'an murmured inwardly. Hey, don't worry. An old, slightly amused voice echoed in his mental sea. I haven't been idle this past year. Leave the lingering resentment of a mere 10,000-year spirit beast to this old man. Kong Ming'an relaxed. Then I'll trouble you, Elder Yi. It's a small matter, came the calm reply.